Okay. Mr. Gruber, are we ready? You need something? Okay, we're going to get started in just about a minute. Are we all set to? Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody to the April meeting of the Cambria Community Services District Board of Directors. If everybody would please rise and join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We do have a quorum. All 5 board members are present today. Mr. Carmel, do we have a report from closed session?
Madam President, we discussed some housekeeping issues related to labor negotiations, but there's nothing to report.
Thank you. Now is the time for agenda review, additions and deletions, changes that anybody would like to make. Mr. Flores is not going to be here today to make a presentation, so I'd just like to make note of that. Are you going to include a report in your general manager's report?
I could, but I think
It doesn't need to be a special presentation.
Senator Flores and I talked, and we believe we covered everything,
Okay.
Including the most recent Senate and Assembly bills that would have impact on the district. So I think everything's pretty much covered.
All right.
But if you do have any additional questions for him, I'll write them down and I'll get in contact with him so he can get those answered.
Yeah, we'll have that at the town hall. Yeah, we'll do that. At the beginning? All right. If we have a consensus, we can do that. Replace the presentation, because there's no decision that needs to be made, so that would be okay, right? If we just get a information report from the town hall? Okay. Is that...
Well, I'm embarrassed to say I don't think I came prepared to do that. I didn't bring any of my notes from it, and taking it off the top of my head, there's not that much up there. So that might present a difficulty, but I'll do my best.
All right. Then next item, if you haven't already, please make sure you silence your electronic devices. If you would like to make a public comment, I don't see any new faces here, but if you'd like to make public comment, there are slips out in the entryway. Just go ahead and fill one out and give it to Ms. Madrid here on the end, and we will take your comments. First item on the agenda is public safety. I don't see the sheriff here today. Do you know if we...
No, he did not indicate to me that he was not going to be here. And just as a side note, I just got a text from Senator Flores. He said, please have a good meeting, everyone. I'm watching via internet today. I apologize for the mix-up getting out there. I told President Rice and Vice President Berenger that this morning. Best regards, Dean. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. Thank you. And no, I haven't heard from the sheriff regarding him not being here today. So,
well, it's a different week of the month, so maybe he didn't get the date change. So that brings us to the fire chief report. Chief Hollingsworth, welcome.
Welcome, Madam President.
And just,
I'm sorry,
I didn't mean to interrupt,
Gruber.
Madam President. I just asked Chief Hollingsworth also to, as part of his report, to talk a little bit about a possible other safer grant grant that may be available. So I had him included in his fire chief's report, but I didn't want to blindside the board, so I also wanted him to talk a little bit about if that's okay with the board.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. For the month of March, we had 84 emergency responses. Continuing with the statistical analysis, we're running at about 82.5% of that being local representation of our clientele, if you will. For fire hydrant maintenance, we've got just over half, 160 of them done, or just under half, 160 of them complete, and continuing to work very well with the water department. Jason Buell's been very responsive to helping us out, repair some very minor issues we've been coming up against. If you remember the fairly significant storms we had back in March on the 22nd, we did get a lot of rain here, but not a lot of emergency-related things, trees down and things like that, but they did over the rest of the county. And as I've mentioned before, no place in this county is large enough to fully staff all the various types of emergency specialties that we have. So we have cooperative agreements. One of those is a USAR team, Urban Search and Rescue, and we have members from our department that are members of that team. And if you were to go back and watch the footage on March 22nd, the river rescues that were occurring in Paso Robles, Engineer Mike Berkey from our department was one of the people on the water helping bringing those people out. So that's how that process works. And I'm always really happy to tell you that we're able to help out in other areas just like they were able to come and help us. Additionally, regarding Engineer Berkey, I'm really happy to let you know that he is the assistant to Captain Tarlona in regards to the training stuff we do in our department, and he was actually voted by the entire county emergency services as a group as the training officer of the year for the county. So it shows a real high level of commitment for him and what he's been able to bring for this department. So I'd just like to publicly thank him for what he's been able to do in that regard. Our training academy for our new reserve hires, which are replacing some positions that are vacant right now, starts this next Monday. We've got 4 very excited people coming on staff, and we're going to beat them up for about a week and make sure that they know exactly how we want to do stuff here in Cambria. This last Wednesday, on the 11th, I had the opportunity to go over to Clovis with Director Pearson for a grant training workshop for a federal grant program that is available with some significant monies attached to it. Unfortunately, in the evaluation of that process, it doesn't really look like it's going to be able to apply specifically to Cambria for the types of projects we're looking at. On top of which, the co-share or percentages we would have to come up with because of the category we're in are at 50%. So if we're looking at a project that's $100,000, that's a $50,000 commitment. Now, there's ways to get that matching in regards to volunteer hours and other stuff that's included, but it's still somewhat of a nightmare to coordinate all that. So we're going to keep our eye on that program, but at this point, it's not really it's not feasible that it's going to come to fruition for here. We're remaining in contact with Cal OES. As you remember, we filed 7 different notices of inquiry or interest with the state secondary to the disaster declaration, and we haven't heard back on any of those yet. But as a follow-up to that, I wanted to let you know that we took the opportunity to take all of those that were available, all but one of them, and apply to the Fire Safe Council for the county for those same projects. And they had an executive board meeting this last month, and they have agreed that they love the concept of the projects. There is an enormous amount of money coming available secondary to the way cap and trade is going to work for the state of California and how those funds are going to be available. And they have taken all 6 of the ones we've put in and are writing grants to fund all 6 of those as a possible alternate funding source, and none of those would have matches on our end. On top of which, they would all be managed by the Fire Safe Council, which means there wouldn't be any more administrative work on any of the personnel for the CCSD. So that's a really exciting concept. It's absolutely not a slam dunk. There's more than enough money to get the work done. They've committed well over $2 million to our specific watershed area for these projects. Some of them are outside the district lines and some of them are going to be local. But as they're defining, it's probably not going to be a situation where we don't have enough money. It's probably going to be more along the lines that we don't have enough people to do the work. And because that's going to be happening county and statewide. So we'll absolutely keep you posted on that. We're real excited about that possibility. Director Gruber talked about the possibility of a new SAFER grant, and if I take a real quick step back, one of the things we had talked about, I believe Vice President Behringer, you brought up the possibility of can we just extend and apply to extend the existing SAFER grant or get a new one or to go down that road. And unfortunately, because of the way it's developed, the original one, that was not a possibility. However, because of some of the problems the federal government is seeing with local agencies not being able to come up with funding after the fact to secure and maintain the positions that are being made available through the SAFER grant, they developed a new SAFER program. And instead of it being a 2-year commitment where it is fully funded by the SAFER people at AFG, this is a 3-year program, and it starts at 75% funding, wherein the local government takes on 25%. Second year, it goes to 50%. Third year, it goes to 75%. And the whole concept is to get local government getting used to the process of funding the positions as they come open. So it's a 3-year commitment. It was announced with a very short application period. So typically we would come to the board and absolutely seek permission for this stuff, but it didn't fall within the right category. I went to the general manager, discussed this at length with him, and he gave us the permission to go ahead and apply for it. There's no guarantee that it's going to come, and there's no absolute that we have to accept it if it does. But I just want to keep you in the loop and let you know that that's a possibility. The interesting thing there is that as we're moving, one of the things that might make it more viable is they're looking for places that are looking to fully fund the positions. The fact that we have a ballot that's going to measure and possible vote, or that's going to vote, it actually might make us more viable to actually get the grant. And the interesting thing about that is that if we get it, it could help offset all the other expenses we've been talking about if the vote passes. And we have that period of time between when it passes and when the money would be coming in, it could offset those funds. So it's a real exciting opportunity, and as we get more information about it, we'll let you know. And the last thing I want to bring up is that our local Fire Safe Focus Group has been holding a series of town hall meetings that have been very well attended, really good information about fire safety for the community. Our last one is going to be next Tuesday, April 24th from 3 to 5 o'clock here in the Vets Hall. And they're going to be talking about what do we do now. And they're going to have people like Shirley Bianchi is going to be addressing some of the issues. Rick London with VOAD, which is the Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster, is going to be speaking. Ken Topping is going to be doing a presentation. So if you've missed some of the ones in the past, this would probably be a really good one to go to because it's going to connect all the dots. And how do we work together as a community to provide the best resources for fire safety as we move forward? So that's what I have for you today, and I'm over to you for any questions.
Vice President Behringer.
Just for clarification, when you're talking about the possible grant, a SAFER grant, that has no relationship to our consent item 5E today, or is it?
Absolutely not. That is
Okay.
that's a different grant, and I could address that if you have any questions about it when we come up to it.
It's going to be consent, so maybe you could
I can
comment
address
on
it
that
now if you like.
Sure, please.
You're talking about the regional grant application. If that's appropriate time-wise, we can do that. The regional grant application, secondary discussion we had probably a year and a half ago about moving forward on that grant. We're being the host for the rest of the county and doing all of the heavy lifting in regards to paperwork, application, and coordination. Numerous other agencies, I think there's 8, but I'm not positive, I have to go back, are all in the same position where they have aging out emergency service communication equipment. It gets to the point where it is unrepairable. Manufacturers no longer deal with it. We can't get firmware updates for it. It's not expandable. It doesn't meet the new federal digital requirements. The list goes on. And so we've cooperatively all entered into the process of doing that. The grant is somewhere around $1.5 million for the entire county, and we have a 10% match on that. Now, that's not 10% of 1.5, it's 10% of our share of what we're spending. Every agency is getting different radios, different quantities, some mobile, some handheld, so we're going to be getting more than some agencies and a lot less than others. On top of which, based on the parameters of the grant, we put in our financial requests at the highest end of what the radio spectrum was and the most available, even though we're probably not going to go down that road. So I could guarantee you that our 10% share that's projected is going to be significantly less. We just wanted to make sure we did not underfund that in any possible way and all the other agencies are doing the same. So at this point, we have not been notified that we've been awarded that grant, but one of the things we have to do ahead of time, because it is a regional grant, we have to have a MOU that is signed off by all the participating agencies, because they have to pay us, we pay the federal government, and they don't get any of their product until they give us the money. So it's not going to be a situation where they've gotten what they've put in for and we're waiting on a $20,000 check. So we need the MOU in place.
Could you announce the time and date for the
The town hall meeting?
Yes.
Absolutely. It is
Thank you.
next Tuesday, April 24th, from 3 to 5 p.m. here in the Vets Hall.
3 to 5 here
Yep.
at the Vets Hall? And Mr. Carmel, because that's publicly noticed, all the board members could be there. It wouldn't be a problem. Would that be true? As long as we're not talking about... Right. Thank you. I just want to make sure that we can all come.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Next up on the agenda is presentations, which we do not have after the presentation? Yeah, right. And we were going to have Harry give a brief report on the town hall?
This report on the town hall will be relatively brief, only because it was so long ago. But I think the main focus that at least seemed to be reported on was the potential opportunity of the district to get some type of low-interest loan, some type of funding, perhaps some extended funding, in the next few years to assist us in paying off the debt for the water facility, and maybe getting a lower interest on that particular loan that we already have, and maybe pursuing some other funding as well. So the iBank was quite a bit discussed by Mr. Flores. There were a number of questions and concerns from the audience with regard to the water facility. One of the things that Dean brought up was the use of the term, and of course there's been various terms that have been used, from emergency water facility to sustainable to the advanced water treatment plant. And Dean seemed to think that by using the term emergency, that it would seem to be more of a stopgap measure, and therefore the availability of funding would be lessened just by that term being used. And he felt by using the term sustainable, which seemed to indicate, like I said, it would be around for a longer period of time, that might increase the opportunity to actually gain some funding, as I just mentioned. But also, I think there were a number of questions and concerns from the audience with regard to just the facility itself, and was there really a need for it? And one other thing that Dean brought up that I didn't, nobody really pursued at the time, but he made mention of the fact that he felt that the facility itself and its approval would get to the Coastal Commission. He used the word soon. And since it has yet to go through our own very local, our own local planning commission, as well as the SLO County Board of Supervisors, that it's probably at least a year, maybe a year and a half away before it gets to the Coastal Commission, and there's probably going to be some appeals at that point. So it's probably a little bit further down the road than he anticipated, but he's well versed in what goes on in Sacramento, maybe not that knowledgeable what goes on in SLO County. So I just wanted to elaborate on that. And that's all I can remember off the top of my head, but everybody that I can see sitting at this table was also there, so if anybody wants to add anything else, I'd appreciate that.
Director Pearson.
Yeah, I would just like to thank Director Farmer for putting that whole thing together and getting Mr. Flores here to do that. And there was a great participation by the community and great questions and stuff, and I thought he did a great job fielding them, and I thought Director Farmer did a great job of moderating. So thanks again.
Well, let me just say this. Dean came prepared. It was nice getting a little bit of historical information onto his life. And he had a lot of information to give to us, but there was at least 15 questions asked by members of the community. So it was very uplifting and encouraging gathering of folks. And we probably, I'm hoping that we can do this probably about every 3 months. Just have Dean come back and give us a report on what's going on and have the community get involved. And that's what it's about. Because ultimately, I think one of the concerns that the community has always had is that they're not getting much information and everything is kind of hidden away. And now between that town hall meeting, and we had a great, I would have to say, standing committee on infrastructure this morning, and so the feeling that the community is getting more involved, getting more opportunity to present their feelings and the information that they'd like to present, and more interaction going on between the members of the board, the members of staff, and the community. This can only be a good thing. So thank you.
Director Wharton.
Yeah, just to pile on, Harry, Director Farmer, the people I spoke to who either were in attendance or watched it on the replay thought it was a very valuable event for the community to have. And also, they would probably attend another one in the future when they saw the value that it did bring. What I liked about it is that Dean didn't shy away from anything. Even though you tried to get him back onto his presentation, he kind of said, this is what the public wants to talk about. We're going to talk about this. And he didn't duck and cover when you tried to give him a little bit of a shield there. But yeah, well done, Harry. Thank you.
Thank you. It wasn't so much to give him a shield, but but more to just get him back on what I know his presentation was going to be. But yeah, I would have to give him a compliment. I know there was times when it appeared that Dean, I know you're out there watching, so I hope I'm not misrepresenting you. I think there was times when he was feeling a little bit awkward, but so some of the questions were rather hardball. But the fact that he was willing to take those questions and give the answers, it was. It was a good meeting, and this community deserves more of the same. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. I too would like to echo all of those sentiments, and I'm glad that we were able to have the community discussion. I think that was a helpful thing. Next up, we have public comment. This is the time for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda. If you have not yet turned in a slip so that I know you would like to speak to the board, please grab yourself a slip and fill it out and hand it to Monique. And we're going to start with Karen Dean, followed by Christine Heinrichs. And you'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Karen Dean from Cambria. I'm on the board of directors of Green Space and a member of the Green Space Events Committee. On Sunday, Soto's True Earth and Green Space to Cambria Land Trust are joining forces for an Earth Day event from 11 to 4 p.m. on Center Street. We have a lot of local agencies and organizations around the community that are going to have booths and do presentations. We're going to have a kids zone. Twigs and Things is bringing a big nest built out of branches and things for the kids to play in. And we're going to have lots of food and 5 bands, so there'll be music through the whole 5 hours. Anyway, I put some flyers out on the table with some additional information about what's going on if anyone wants to pick them up. And I hope everyone joins us. It's going to be a fun day, and I'm baking cookies.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dean. Christine Heinrichs, followed by Dawn Howell.
Hello. Thank you for having this meeting, and thank you for having the meeting with Dean Flores. Hi, Dean, wherever you are out there. I was concerned about the same thing that Harry brought up, that he had presented yet another definition of the Sustainable Water Project. For him, as we discussed, it means the Emergency Water Project, but he's just calling it something else for the purpose of trying to sell this as an ongoing project for more funding. But that's not what the Sustainable Water Project is in Cambria. The Emergency Water Project has been substantially modified to become the Sustainable Water Project, and that's why there's a supplemental environmental impact report, which, although the board has certified that, I do not believe that that has gone any further, and I think that that is still open to further discussion. The Regional Water Quality Control Board mentioned it. They say that it contains project modifications, including changing the purpose of the project from a facility intended for use during emergency drought conditions to supply water to existing residents of Cambria to an everyday facility which would supply enough water to accommodate new development. So it's hard to know when we say emergency water project, sustainable water project, really, what are we talking about? That they seem satisfied that the SEIR covers everything satisfactorily, but the California Environmental Quality Act requires that an environmental impact report evaluate the growth-inducing impacts of a proposed action. A growth-inducing impact is defined as follows: the way in which a proposed project could foster economic or population growth or the construction of additional housing, either directly or indirectly, in the surrounding environment. This is exactly what the Sustainable Water Project is designed to do, is to add housing and new residents to Cambria. I think that's very questionable. I think it's open to further discussion, and I think that having the same term for two different projects is bound to cause confusion in the community, and I would hope that the board can clear that up. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Don Howell is the last request I have to speak.
Thank you. I would like to just echo what you all have said and the other speakers have said. The town hall meeting with Dean Flores was really very, very useful, certainly for me, because one wonders why we're spending $7,000 a month and what are we getting for it. I think that I came away satisfied that I think we probably are getting our money's worth. Interestingly, the discussion of the naming of the advanced water treatment plant, it was useful to get it out there. We understand now a little bit about what was meant by sustainable in the context that Dean Flores was talking about. I tend to agree with the previous speaker that there is some ambiguity here that probably should be cleared up. And as I recall, I think we even, there was some in an editorial in the Cambrian also referring to the naming thing. So there's an element of some importance, but and certainly the board members here could hear some of the frustration and the feelings of betrayal that some of the constituents have had when we thought we were voting for an emergency supply, only to discover that it morphed into a sustainable supply, whatever that means. So there is some issue there. I think we're a long way towards resolving some of the problems of trust. I was at the infrastructure meeting this morning, and I said it was excellent. I kept my mouth mostly shut, but I was there mostly to learn, and it's an amazing thing. The infrastructure, the whole this whole business. I often wondered how sewers work, you know. So it's been very useful. The last thing I want to, again, kind of regarding the town hall meeting, a question was addressed to General Manager Gruber regarding the operation of the facility. And while we might take issue as to whether it's actually in a turnkey state now or not, but what did disturb me was the speaking about the possibility of selling connections as a way of getting revenue. Now, that is a legitimate question, but I don't really believe it is a question for the general manager. That is a policy question which needs to be discussed by the elected members of the board who are elected by people who would live in this community, and where the selling of additional connections becomes a very, very big and important issue. So while if asked, a manager might say, well, you can do A or B or C or D. That's legitimate. But what I heard was a little bit of advocacy going on, and that disturbed me a little bit. So I just wanted to bring that out and bring it to your attention. I don't think anyone has evil intentions or anything, but I think it's very important what people say and what we call things. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is this clock showing time on it? Okay, but the lights are not on and it didn't buzz, so it's all right. It runs so I can tell when time is up, and as long as people can see how much time they have left, I think we're okay. I don't need that. That's not a good sound. All right. Next up is the consent agenda. Before we get into the consent agenda, I want to ask if there's any items that anybody would like to pull from consent. Vice President Berenger?
Not
Director
poll,
Pearson?
but I have one correction for the minutes.
Okay.
On page 69, the Cambria Health Care District Liaison assignment is assigned to director only. I thought it was assigned to me.
Yeah, I think they're supposed to be.
Corrected?
It's missing a word there. Yeah, I noticed that too.
That's okay. That's okay. I just wanted to make sure I got my name in the paper at least once.
And that they spell it correctly, right?
Director Farmer, is there any items you would like to pull for separate consideration?
Well, not necessarily to pull, but as I usually like to do, I like to point out some of the expenses that have been incurred by the water facility. So once again, on page 31, we have another radium lab test for a little over $10,000, which means that in less than a year, just $40,000 have been spent on radium, in this case, radium, uranium, and asbestos testing for the facility, as well as a $6,000 lab test for chlorite, bromate, and chlorine. Now, I do want to say that one of the things that was brought up this morning from Engineer Greshams was that he's been in touch with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and starting, I guess, as of June, the need for lab testing is going to be greatly diminished, and at least we won't have these expenses anymore, well, certainly not to the degree that we've had so far. And as I've joked in the past, we could channel Madame Curie and have the radium testing done for less money than these folks have been doing it, but that's just my humble opinion. I also wanted to bring up another item because, you know what, it's interesting to me that well, let me just go on. So on page 32, we have a $16,000 expense for the installation of the pump for the new Baker tank that has been installed to, store brine from the evaporation pond, and also $12,000 for implementing the evaporation pond closure. That's on page 37. And then finally on page 45, and I'd like to have an explanation from someone, most likely the general manager, of course, almost $30,000 from a PG&E line extension deficiency for San Simeon Creek Road. And I'm wondering what that is. Mr. Gruber, could you enlighten us on that in any way, shape, or form?
I can address the first two if Bob is willing to address the third one. So the Baker tank installation is, we have 2 Baker tanks out there right now that we're leasing, and that is for the cease and desist order as part of the closure plan. And then the other item you mentioned, Director Farmer, is also regarding the closure plan. Right. And as you know, I think it's public information that we are trying to at least recoup some of the costs associated with that facility from CDM Smith, and hopefully we'll be successful in that. But those costs associated with those are from the Baker tank or from the closure plan and the impoundment basin.
No, I understand that, but this one item here, the almost $30,000 for this line extension deficiency, Engineer Gresham, do you have any idea what that is?
Sure. I'm sorry, I have 2 documents, different page numbers, so I didn't track quite which page you're on. So if you could repeat.
It's page 45 in the agenda. Okay. With regard to the expenditure report, it's page 15 of 26 down at the bottom.
And which line item was it again?
It's the last item there under PG&E, the last three items under
Okay.
Pacific Gas and Electric.
So the $14.33 or the
No.
$11,657.80?
I think you're on the wrong page. My apologies for that, but
Page 45.
on page 15 of 26, here, I'll tell you what.
Here.
Let's stay on the mics, folks, so we get,
He knows what he's talking about.
thank you.
Okay.
Actually, we were on the same page.
What confused me is that's wastewater, and that's why I kind of hesitated, because I wasn't sure I was on the right line. Unless our sheets are different, I have wastewater electric service lift station 4, January of 2018. And
No,
I have-
I could have sworn we were on the same page there.
Yeah, I thought we were too. Now, I'm looking for any SWF charge.
Are you
On that-
both on the February
on PG&E?
expenditures or the March?
I have February here. So, am I in March now?
March would be a good month to be on.
Right here.
Sewer line.
Okay, all right, okay. I'm sorry about that.
And what he's indicating
Okay.
is they both cover $30,000.
All right, got it, okay.
Only if you know barber shop.
We need Elizabeth. She'd have it.
Yeah, I think this is probably related to the original extension of the power line to the facility, but I have to confirm that and get back to you to give you an accurate answer.
Okay. I guess my concern is, last year, the last calendar year, we spent at least $1.6 million on this facility that isn't working. And that included, task orders for CDM Smith, the Michael Baker International supplemental EIR. And so it was understandable that, wow, all this money is, well, not necessarily, I shouldn't say understandable. Don't erase that, okay? But we could see how, therefore, these costs would accumulate. So we would have thought, well, maybe it would drop down a little bit. And actually, in February, we only spent $86,000 on the facility. But in March, once again, it's $105,000. And considering January was just under $400,000, we've already spent just under $600,000 on this facility in the first 3 months of this year. And of course, it isn't operating. So it's just important for me, for the community to know what's happening with regard to the expense that it is costing them for this water facility. That's what I wanted to bring up with regard to the expenditure report. So thank you very much.
Do you want me to reply?
Madam President, may I just
Vice President Barron?
I don't have any questions for Mr. Gressens, and thank you I understand that you continue to point that out. One small point that should be made, though, is that we shouldn't misrepresent Bob's comment this morning as saying that we will not have to do additional testing. It's that the request went into the Water Board, and in June they'll consider reducing it, but we shouldn't set up expectations that they will cease. It's good movement, but let's similarly with Mr. Flores, he gave a lot of ideas, and he's very positive, and he wants to move forward, and the people that want to move forward can help him do so. But we shouldn't assume that iBank is going to come in and save our position. It's a direction. It's a good direction. We can do it with him. We couldn't do it without him. But let's not count any chickens before they hatch or whatever. But thanks for your work, Bob.
Yeah, I thought we had some good news this morning as far as from the Water Board considering this as part of their June 28th meeting that's coming up to look at our monitoring permit requirements. And essentially what we asked for is when the facility's offline, that we be given allowance to suspend some of the costly groundwater monitoring and they did agree to look at that and seek approval of that at their June 28th meeting. So that'll save, if they approve that, and it still is an if, that'll save a substantial sum versus what we have to do right now, and that's probably over $100,000 right there in that one item. So $100,000 to $150,000 when you consider staff cost on top of the lab cost. So that was good news. Our goal, and I think I mentioned this at one of the past meetings, staff reports, is to have that thing operational by September 1, should it be needed by that time. Now, we had a very good March. We had, at the end of February, only 25% of our total rainfall for the year. And at the end of March, we had 75%. So we had a great March, and those are really good rains. When you get heavy rain late in the year, that helps sustain your groundwater basin that much longer into the dry season. So that was very fortunate to have that much rain. I think it was over 9 inches of rain in that 1 month. So we're doing better. And again, the intention is to have it ready to go by September 1. Jerry and I had a very good discussion with a local contractor not too long ago about how to haul off the RO concentrate. So we just have to get that ironed out as far as getting proposals ready to go. Some of that could be rented equipment versus fixed facilities. We have to look at the various options on that yet. So, your staff at least are trying our best to make sure that thing can run and be used, and it's a good comfort to know, especially when you're at 25% rainfall at the end of February, that you have something like that ready to go.
Thank you for your good work, Bob, and we might have to channel Madam Curie if we don't get that approval.
May I just make one quick comment? I believe the Director Farmer referenced the January of the $400,000, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rudy, but I think that was the loan. Part of the reason that was so, we make loan payments periodically on the facility. So there's two really costs. In Director Farmer, I've heard you every board meeting, and I agree with you. I think staff agrees with you. I think the community agrees with you that the sampling requirements of that facility are very onersome. But I can completely understand the reason the Regional Water Quality Control Board did that when they issued us, because it's an indirect reuse facility, and frankly, it was one of a kind. But since that period of time, we've had so many non-detects NDs, and so we started the dialogue with them, and what's being proposed in the draft staff report that's, as Bob indicated, that's going to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, is they still will require us to sample 3 months after the facility shuts down, and then a month after the facility shuts down. So as Bob indicated, we don't have the exact figures right yet, but it's between $100,000 and $150,000 in lab cost savings. But the indirect cost is staff time associated with collecting those samples and coordinating. So there's the approach we're taking to this facility, right, wrong, or indifferent, is there's direct costs that we have control over, and there's indirect costs. And there were several items that you mentioned, and I look at those, and it's unfortunate that those are things that we don't have control over. We've discussed both in open session and other means of communications that regarding that brine pond, and those are the monies that we've had to spend are things that we don't have control over, and hopefully there'll be some effort to reimburse us on some of those costs. The things we do have control over are the continued dialogue with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, asking them to reduce the sampling, and then the automation of our reports. Some of our reports are several hundred pages long, and we're manually inputting those. Well, we're migrating into an Excel format right now, and eventually we'll go to WIMS, which is Water Management Information System, which will enable us to fully automate all the lab data directly into the reports. The indirect cost savings with that will be a significant amount of staff times, because it's a full-time position right now with the addition of a consultant. So we're just continuing to try to reduce the cost, and I know it doesn't seem like it, on the things that we have control over. The things that we don't have control over, such as the cease and desist order and the closure plan, unfortunately, we've had to come up with a significant amount of money. I agree with you, but hopefully, again, there'll be some avenues and for which we can recuperate some of those funds. But But I agree with you. I think I agree with you that the money that's been spent on lab sampling is very expensive, and hopefully in a year or two, maybe we can go back if this is approved and go back and say, okay, now we have a bunch more NDs on the operational side. Would there be a willingness on the board's part, not this board, the Regional Water Quality Control Board? We've had so many NDs on the operational aspect of things. Would there be a willingness on your part to reduce the sampling even further? And so it's a journey, and hopefully we're going to continue to go down that path. And you know, with the good relationship we have with them right now, hopefully they'll be receptive to that. But I think what you've said regarding the cost is I agree, and we need to try to get those costs down associated with that facility. So thank you, Madam President.
Vice President Berenger?
Yes, with that, with the correction on the minutes,
I haven't pulled the items that I wanted.
Oh, you want to pull some items?
Yeah, for separate consideration.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And excuse me, I'm sorry, but could I just follow up on what was just said?
Yes, please.
First, I want to say to the Regional Water Quality Control Board that my comments about the lab testing is not so much a critique of them requiring this, as is the fact that this is, once again, another additional cost of how much this facility is costing this community. Also, I want to thank Vice President Berenger for correcting me. As you know, often happens here, that we have to get corrected because we thought it was this, but it wasn't exactly that. And I'm glad that he was listening, that Vice President Berenger was listening more closely at the meeting this morning, where I was wishfully hoping, oh, cool, starting in June, the costs will go down. Well, actually, that's when they're going to be considering it. So my apologies there. And I think there was something else I wanted to say, but I've forgotten that as well. So thank you.
Director Pearson?
Yes, I would like to know what those charges were for at some point in time. Please, $23,000 is a lot of money. And the other numbers are not small either. So I would like to know if they're just now getting around to charging us for extending their line over to the facility. That's incredible for a corporation to wait that long. But I would like to know what those charges were for.
Yeah, I know. It's been a while since I looked at the PG&E service agreement. Sometimes they spread the payments over time, almost like a loan. So that's kind of in the back of my head. I have to look at that agreement that was signed at the time when the facility was being built to see how the payment terms were developed. And sometimes they do spread it out over time as opposed to charging you all up front. I just can't remember that detail right now, but we'll certainly try to get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. There's two items that I want to pull for separate.
I'm sorry, Madam President. There is one correction to the expenditure report on page 40.
Page 40. Oh, look, I bet I have it highlighted.
Oh, yeah, page 40 of the agenda item. Anyway, if you look at one where it says Ricardo Gomez, that was voided. For some reason, it shows up as an expenditure. So
okay,
I just want to strike that was not paid. Voided.
That was. Yeah, it was actually. Thank you for that clarification. So if we approve this report with that correction, with that eliminated, and the books are already been, correct. The journal entries have already been made. And
that's correct, Mayor. Yes, correct.
All right.
President.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're going to pull something?
Yes, I have just one item for separate consideration, and I have a couple comments. The item I'd like to pull for separate consideration is item C. And we can consider that after we do the entire consent agenda.
Is that 5C? Is that what you mean?
5C. Okay. The comments that I had was the comment that Mr. Hernandez already brought up on the expenditure reports. And I'll address some of the other concerns that I have when we go over the budget later in the meeting, because I want to speak to some of the expenditures that are going on. It seems like there's a lot of money going out the last couple of months, like significantly more than usual. Also on the minutes, I don't really want to make a change particularly. I want to first say that Ms. Madrid does a spectacular job. And as I was reading through the minutes, I was thinking to myself, wow, I need to be better at having the discussion focused and clear so that we have clear motions. There were a few items where the motion even wasn't clear in the minutes, and I think that that has to do at least as much with my chair position as it does with Monique's note-taking, because we do more informal kind of discussions after the motion. The particular item that brought it to my attention was, let's see, I know I've got it marked here. It was one where we had some significant discussion about changes to the, let's see. Oh, about the pros goals. It just wasn't really clear that what those goals actually ended up being. And because they're not in the minutes, and this is the official record, it seems like they were in the agenda, but it seems like, and again, this is at least as much on me as chair as it is on the person over there furiously typing away, among other things that are going on. But I want to make sure that what happens is we have a clear record of what we're doing here. Otherwise, no reason to have 4-hour meetings if we don't have a clear record. So, there's
Before you move on from
Yes.
that, when I read the minutes, it seemed to me pretty clear that the pros had an agenda, and we sent pros back and said that they should look stronger at doing some development of the fields, and I think that's what the minutes said. Or do you have a different interpretation?
It wasn't clear what the pros goals were that they brought to us. And it said that we added the fields that we would like to see them work on at least trying to figure out where they might go and look for money for the fields.
Okay.
But the other goals that they brought to us, I think, should be listed in the minutes, unless I'm misunderstanding what should be in. I mean,
I agree. If they weren't
Seems
listed,
to me.
But they were in the agenda packet. They were there,
Right.
so we were confirming those goals.
Right.
Perhaps we can approve the minutes based upon.
Oh, no, I don't have
insertion
any
of
problem
that.
approving them. This is just mostly a comment. I don't have a problem approving what's already been done. I just wanted to, this is a communication thing and a trying to make sure that we're staying on target with what we're trying to get done here and having a clear record. And I'm just saying that it's on my shoulders, and so I'm trying to get there. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda except for item C.
I move that we approve the agenda item except for item C, with the comment that 5D, the appointment of Karen Dean to the committee, is laudable in that she has already attended 2 meetings and is in fact the vice chair.
That's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad that we've got somebody on it there. All right. So is there a second for that motion?
I second.
So moved by Vice President Behringer, seconded by Director Pearson to approve the consent agenda, except for item C. Can we have a roll call, please?
Director Behringer?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Wharton?
Aye.
Director Farmer?
Aye.
President Rice?
Aye. The motion passes 5-0. All right. Consent agenda item C is consideration to approve the amended agreement for consultant services with Techtegrity and authorize an additional $1,500 for labor costs. General Manager, would you like to make a presentation?
Yes, Madam President. As you indicated, the board authorized $45,494.50 to the purchase of hardware, software, and labor costs for the update and replacement of the equipment of the CCSD network. The cost was an estimate based on the engineer's review of the required work. At the time of the preparation of the proposal, the Board of Directors did not have the CCSD-issued email addresses. By the time we went live with the new Microsoft Office 365 software, the Board of Directors' emails had been added to the system. This addition was not initially accounted for in the original proposal. To date, the total cost for hardware, software, and labor has been $43,750.75, with the remaining balance of $1,743.75. The cost to finish the project is expected to require an additional 12 hours of labor at the cost of $125 an hour, creating an additional need for $1,500. The project has currently completed the following milestones. Microsoft Office 365 has been migrated. Delivery of the new server hardware has been put in. Laserfish migration, MOMS migration, decommission of Laserfish server, replacement of wireless access points at all 5 sites, and the replacement of the network switching at all 5 sites. The following tasks still remain to be completed. And you can see those. I don't need to read the whole staff report to you, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, Madam President, you may have, or the board. And I would also ask Monique Madrid to help me out on this, because she's really been the project manager on this one. But any questions you may have, we'll be more than happy to answer.
Okay. I do have a few questions, and it primarily has to do with managing the contract. So far, since we've hired Techtegrity, of all the expenses from the expenditure reports, we've spent $83,000 with them. Our contract for the providing support, just the basic, if we weren't doing that extra project of replacing the servers, is supposed to be $26,000. You add that in, and it's still, we are over by a lot. And it concerns me that we've got overage fees for basically almost every month for the hours of service they provide in terms of support. And if we need that much support, that's okay. I'm not saying that let's not have it, but let's try and make sure that we're doing the smart thing with our money, because $83,000 is nothing to sneeze at when we were expecting 67, 68, including the servers. And splitting out the ones, I don't know which ones specifically were supposed to be within the 45 that was approved by the board, but this is significantly more that's continuing to go out, and I just am not comfortable with that. And I'm not comfortable with another $1,500 and the explanation that they put in 70 hours to implement and migrate to the Office 365 in the original contract was 70 hours, and there were 35 users. I'm not sure which people are counted in that 35, and I don't really want to go into that kind of detail, but it seems to me that 12 hours for 5 email addresses seems like a lot. So I just, if it's not just that, that's fine. And I don't mind, but $300 an email box seems like a heck of a lot of money when they charge $125 an hour. So I don't know if that you can answer this, but I for one am going to be voting against this particular extension, because it has to stop at some point.
So there's 2 issues. The item before you today is to approve the additional $1,500. And I know you were at a conference this week, so we didn't have the opportunity to talk about the additional cost. I would need to sit down with you, staff would need to sit down with you and go over your calculations. In all fairness to staff, I don't have that information that you're talking about in front of you. If we would have had the opportunity to evaluate it, I could prepare a better answer for you. Again, the item in front of you today is for the extra $1,500. And if there are some as you indicate, I trust that you're accurate. But I'm not prepared to answer those questions. And maybe Monique is at this time. Okay, but thank you so much for bringing that to our attention.
And I don't like to catch you off guard, and normally I would have given you a heads up on it.
You always do, yes.
I just went through the expenditure report and put down what was specifically to Integrity, and that's how I came up with those numbers, but I wouldn't expect that you would have an answer.
Well, she may have,
It's a concern that I have. I just want to, and I just wanted to register
Absolutely.
that another 1,500 is, I don't.
So what I'm hearing you say is the amount that we budgeted originally for this fiscal year, we're over that considerably by about $20-something thousand, and that's a very good question, a very good question, and a very good concern. So, if you want.
Sure, I'd be happy to give you some of the information that I have off the top of my head. So first, the contract for IT support is based on hours, which we estimated, and because it was a new firm, they're not sure of what our needs are. So we estimated 10 hours a month. Now staff has the opportunity and the ability to be able to open a ticket and get assistance whenever they need to. So that's how that is managed. So anytime we go over, it's because staff is seeking support. So it may be that we did underestimate, but we did know that it was an estimation of 10 hours a month. As far as the email migration and the cost of the email, that included, the costs that you're talking about did include the additional licenses, as well as the cost per hour. We did have one email that was corrupt, and it used quite a bit of time to uncorrupt or fix and repair that email address. Plus, we had some other hiccups as far as the email migration goes. And in addition, we've also had to purchase many replacements of computers over time this year, and that also takes time, which isn't included in 10 hours. So those would be the reasons, but we'd be happy to break it down for you if you'd like to see it.
As I said, I don't really need to get into the weeds, but I would like to see some sense of control, at least that we see these. They gave us an assessment of all of the computers and their age and when they were going to be out of warranty, and most of them are. We should have a plan, especially going into the next budget year, that says not just Bob's computer crashed, we got to buy one tomorrow. But let's try to plan ahead instead of just being reactionary. And I just used that one example because it was on the top of my brain, not for any. I'm not trying to catch anybody up or anything. I'm just trying to say that this is an issue here and a lot of money. So, and I don't support the additional 1,500 on the contract. If they can't do it under in what they estimated. I mean.
Madam
Vice President Berger.
I'd like to mention that if we underestimated, the amount of support we were going to get, I see that the Microsoft 360 is far more powerful and is going to give us a great opportunity for efficiencies within the department. And anytime, being on the other side, many times when you try and get a new client, you become aggressive. But at the other hand, if you're a good supplier, you eat something the first year and you move on for future support. So, but that's just a comment.
Well, actually, the costs do exceed $1,500, but we did negotiate with them to cap it at $1,500 to do the rest of the work.
Okay. All right. I would entertain Director Wharton.
One thing that Monique had brought up was staff can seek a support ticket, or they can enter a support ticket at any time. Are any of these like duplicate tickets? Like if you have a problem versus maybe somebody on the other side of the office has kind of a similar or same problem, and they're submitting 2 requests for 2 billable tickets for the same problem? Is there a funnel that it can maybe, if Haley has a problem on her computer and Stephanie has a computer on hers, is a problem on her computer, could it funnel through somebody, or is that too cumbersome and too time consuming?
We can actually get reports on what has been requested as far as support goes, and we are working with the tech company to minimize some of those issues, but all of our departments are very different. So, I don't always know if somebody in wastewater is having an issue as opposed to somebody in fire. It depends on what the issue is and how significant it is. But, so the company is learning our needs, and so as we progress, we'll have less need for support as we continue to stabilize our system by continuing to repair computers. And we do replace our computers. They have about a 3-year lifespan, and we replace them at about 5 years. So, we do our best to make our assets last.
Thank you.
All right. I would entertain a motion to approve or disapprove of item consent agenda item C. Director Wharton,
I'll second.
you want to make the
I'll make a
motion?
motion to approve. I thought you were making the motion to approve. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Motion by Director Wharton. Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. I don't think we need a further motion. I think that's just not approved. Yes? Unless somebody would like to make another one. All right, so item 5C is not approved. Thank you very much. We can move on. Do people need a break? Stand up and do the hokey pokey, or are we all doing okay? You got it. Hearings and appeals. Yes, Director Wharton.
Just looking back to that last motion, was there a total what was the total that we negotiated down from to the 1,500? Do we have that, or is that public?
I don't honestly know, but they had given us a higher number, and I just told them there's no way. And so we said, I honestly don't know. I just told them they were going to have to make it reasonable. So.
As an additional comment, had that been more of the light of day, I could have seconded it if I had more information with which to do it. So
perhaps it can come back next time.
So it can come. Yeah, I don't think it. I would recommend that if staff feels that it's critical, that they bring the item back.
Is that copacetic? All right. All right, hearings and appeals. We have one item.
Yes, Madam President and board members. Item 6A is hearings and appeals. This is a discussion and consideration to fix water and wastewater standby or availability charges as provided in Government Code 61124, subsection B, and consideration of adoption of Resolution 08-2018, fixing water and wastewater standby or availability charges for fiscal year 2018 and 2019. With that, I'll turn it over to District Council Tim Carmel. Thank you, Board.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This is our annual public hearing to set our standby and availability charges for water and wastewater. These charges have been in effect since the mid-1980s. They're very critical to us because they're one of the only recurring funding sources for infrastructure repair and maintenance. So they have extreme importance. In 1996, when Prop 218 came into effect, these fees were grandfathered in. And they were at that point frozen, and they've been at that level since 1996 for the past 22 years. They're imposed on all improved lots and on unimproved lots that have active service commitments. And it's a two-step process. We do this in April. We set it in April, and then we confirm it in May and put it on the tax roll in May. And I think it's $178,000 for water and $119,000 for wastewater. Again, a very important source of revenue. But with that, you have in front of you Resolution 08-2018. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
All right, I'd like to open the public hearing. I don't have any requests to speak on this item. I see that.
Which has already been approved, but I think we can take public comment.
Yeah, I opened the public hearing, we'll. Is there anybody that would like to testify for the public hearing? Please come approach the mic.
It's Mike approaching the mic.
Please give us your name.
Water wait list number? Sorry. Oh, yeah. He wants me to start over. Does anybody want me to start over?
I think we got it.
Okay, go ahead.
No, and Monique can confirm this for me. Active service commitments, actually a will serve letter or a meter that's not actually being utilized, but not wait list.
All right, specifically, for example, in the new Lamert lots that have what's called an active meter, even though in-ground meter, even though no water is going through them, what status would that mean?
That's a very good question. Monique, what do you think? I think it stands on separate footing. Yeah. Well, I'm going to defer to Monique.
And I have a comment.
I think it's probably on there, but I could verify that for the next meeting.
So you,
We'll have the list next meeting anyways, but if you wanted us to look up a parcel in Lamert, we could do that.
well, I don't mean a single parcel. I mean there are, 15 or 20
meters
of them that have a similar program to grandfathering, although they're not really called grandfathered meters, to my knowledge.
And they're on the existing commitment list.
They're on what?
The existing commitment list, is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Now, I want to make it clear, I don't have any financial interest in any of them, just an interest to note how you're going to categorize those as far as the fees are concerned. So if you want to come back next month and answer that, fine with me.
We'll be coming back next month and confirming the charges, so at that time, we'll be able to answer the question.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. And seeing no one else approaching, I would like to close the public hearing and open the board discussion. Director Farmer?
One item that, thank you, on page 129, which is the last page on this particular item, where it says the CCSD has identified a few priority water and wastewater CIP capital improvements projects, major maintenance, and capital outlay projects, including, and it says effluent screens, water distribution systems improvements and upgrades. And the third item is Stewart Street tank replacement. The reason I'm wanting to address this particular item is that back in April of last year, beginning of April of last year, there were a group of us, General Manager Gruber, Engineer Greshens, Water Supervisor Buell, Director Beringer, and myself, and we met at that tank, and at that time, like I say, just barely over a year ago, the only discussion at that time was replacing the tank, and therefore would we go with a bolted tank or a welded tank, meaning that one would be a little stronger and last a little longer, like 25 to 30 years, and the cost would be somewhere, let's say around $300,000, $400,000 in that range. We met again at the end of that month, and at that time, General Manager Gruber suggested we just do some minor repairs that would be somewhere, let's say around $35,000. Now, what happened was William Bellis, who does a lot of the work with regard to water infrastructure, in fact, pretty much all of the assistance that we get with water infrastructure, he recommended at that time that we go with replacing the tank as opposed to doing the minor repairs. Well, we wound up just doing the minor repairs earlier this year, and now it's coming back that we need to replace the water tank. So I'm just wondering why we didn't do it last year when it was initially agreed upon that that's what we would do. It just concerns me because I am assuming, like, the cost of everything pretty much goes up with the passage of time. And since we were already told that from the expert, no reflection on our general manager, but the expert that we rely on, Mr. Bellis, said that his first option would be to replace the tank and not just do minor repairs. and we didn't do that, and now we're talking about replacing the tank again. I'm just concerned, once again, I feel like, well, somehow we kind of dropped the ball in decision-making, and what was the right thing to do. I don't necessarily need any kind of comment on that. I just am making an observation that's kind of troubling to me, because decision-making in the past hasn't always been up to snuff, and I feel like maybe that didn't happen again.
Vice President Behringer.
I'd like to make a brief comment on that. These are just some examples. As you know, there's so many demands on the water and wastewater system, and this goes back to 1996, I believe. It's our only reliable source to offset some of these funds. And there, as you and I know, there's plenty of other things. So there was and the Stewart Street tank still needs to be replaced sometimes in the future. These are just a few examples of the millions of dollars worth of requirements that we have. We have to be able to do some kind of estimating, and I don't have a problem with that.
I have a question in the report on page 128. It says that on the table at the bottom of the page, it says that the 16-17 infrastructure funding sources were as follows, and there's revenues for operations listed there, but there aren't any on the next table, which is the 17-18. Is that because we don't know those numbers yet, or we're not specifically assigning an amount that's coming in from rates, or can you speak to that, please?
That's a good question. We're in the budget process right now, and I'll address that a little bit more in the general manager's report with regards to, funding of capital improvement projects and what the board willing to pay out of things like that. So we'll have that information for you. But very well, if you recall, we took a zero-based budget approach last year. There was the infrastructure committee and the budget committee. If you remember, they're a little bit at odds on wanting to do some things, and then the budget committee holding the line and saying we want to have a zero-based budget, or a budget that doesn't require any money to come out of reserves, and that's the direction we're heading again this year, only because out of necessity, and so I hope that answers your question, Madam President.
Motion. Vice President Behringer.
If there's no further discussion, I move that we adopt Resolution 082018, establishing water and wastewater standby or availability charges for fiscal year 2018-2019.
Is there a second?
I second.
Motion by Vice President Behringer and a second by Director Pearson. Is there any further discussion? All right, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Director Behringer?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Wharton?
Aye.
Director Farmer?
Aye.
Director Rice?
No. Thank you very much. That motion passes 4-1. And I would like to take a 5-minute break. We come back at 3:25. Before we go, Before we go on, are we? Okay. So before we go on, there was a request sent to the board regarding item on consent F, which is the about clearing the lots, and there was a specific question about counting, it's the annual fire hazard fuel reduction program. I believe you got a copy of that email. I'm just trying to see if I can see it here. Right, it just said there's clarification that acknowledged that the written comment was received on that item, and Chief Hollingsworth.
If it's appropriate, I'd like to go ahead and address that real quickly, just to answer your questions.
I want to make sure that everything's out and open.
Absolutely. So Mr. Schwartz sent the note asking some questions about the expansion of the program, and it's something we do every year. Due to obvious recent events that have happened in the state, we aggressively and proactively look at the community every year and define whether or not some parcels need to come off, some parcels need to go on. And through an exhaustive survey of the community, we added about 125 parcels this year. That's not unheard of. We do that on a regular basis. However, that was done completely independent of looking at any other maps or overlays in regards to Special Project 1 or land conservancy issues or things like that. And it would be fairly inappropriate to go in and just denude and destroy a lot of the parcels in that area, like in the Fern Canyon, which is a special preserve. We want to be very cognizant of what we have there. It's very beneficial to the community, and be very careful in how we approach it. So what we're looking at doing proactively is developing basically a different use code, identifying those on the maps within our system, and possibly having the ability to apply a lesser stringent type of cutting criteria for those parcels. So we're going to be meeting with the Schwartzes, with Carlos, because a lot of this is happening on CCSD-owned property, with Mike Rice, who does a lot of the contract work, and actually secondary to your approval of item 5F is going to be continued in the contract for this year. He's very environmentally sensitive and very good at what he does. So we're going to be meeting hopefully in the next couple of weeks to kind of help refine and define some of the less restrictive cutting requirements for those areas so we don't create any problems. It's just that fine balance between a severe environmental concern and trying to create a fire-safe community. So we really appreciate his input, and they've been very helpful, and I was able to have a very good conversation with Laura Schwartz this morning about that. And I think we've addressed the issues, and we're going to be looking at that the next week. But if she has any other comments.
Well, I just want to read into the record because I did find it. It says there's no fiscal, it says in the item, there's no fiscal impact as all costs are directly billed to the property owners. The CCSD is property owner of at least 60 of the listed parcels containing at least 240 individual lots. So how are we going to be doing the fuel removal treatment on our properties? The fire fuel reduction treatments on CCSD-owned parcels and other preserved forest areas should be done in accordance with the Cambria Forest Management Plan section on removing understory fuels.
Absolutely.
And that's why it was always good to have Chief Miller at the Forest Committee meetings so that these things could be caught ahead of time.
Yep.
So, thank you, Chief Hollingsworth. Did you want to add anything, Mr. Gruber? All right. Thank you for indulging me on that item. Let's move on. We have next board reports and committee reports, and we don't have any specific order, so why don't we just start over here with Director Pearson.
Okay, I have a number of reports to do here, I guess. First, the Finance Standing Committee met and at a kickoff meeting. We were able to have some really top-notch people on that committee, made great recommendations as to what we should and shouldn't cover, and we will be addressing and going over those at the next meeting, which is April 26th at 9 a.m. at the fire station. And we, are looking for the community to join in and participate. There was a number of good people there last time. And we got a lot of good participation and stuff. So also on the agenda will be the balance sheet. We're going to have Mr. Hernandez go over the balance sheet and just give us an update on where we stand and go over it to make sure everybody is understanding exactly what each line item on the balance sheet is. I don't have a report on the CCHD because I was at training and I was unable to attend their meeting, so I don't have anything on that. The chief covered the grant training that he and I went to. I don't think I need to add anything more to that. I did go to CSDA training earlier this week for 2.5 days. It was excellent training and a lot of good networking. And I found out that there are a lot of districts that have a lot more problems than we do, which is amazing to me at times. But the training has given me a lot of additional areas and examples of what we need to be looking at. And one of those areas is there are several policies that we need to have updated. And I know staff is working on some of those. And there are some other policies that were pointed out that I'm not sure that we have yet. And I'll need to get with staff and find out if we have them. And if we do, look at those and see where we are on those. In dealing with the policies, there were so many that came up that at my next meeting, I may recommend that we have an ad hoc committee to go over policies and decide which ones we really do need and which ones we don't need. So that's my reports.
Thank you very much for those. Vice President Berenger.
Okay, I attended the NCAC meeting yesterday. I don't think there's anything specific to report. The CTB is continuing to do what the CTB does. And we're going to, actually, the CTB is working on a long-range planning effort, trying to keep it relatively inexpensive, but it's always good to have a 5-year plan. I think that's something the board, this board should be looking at. The infrastructure committee was just done this morning. I haven't even gotten a chance to think through all of the put the minutes together and come up with some kind of a report. But one thing that became very clear is that we have a replacement schedule, a reserve fund, and those would mainly be recommendations to the Finance Committee, but at least begin that process. And something that President Rice has been talking about for a long time is to have an asset list, and that asset list projects the length of the usability of the product and so on and so forth. Now, none of that is being considered as far as coming up with a sinking fund regarding the rate study. And let me comment briefly about the rate study. That is just to get some of these infrastructure projects off the ground, and the rates need to be increased in order for that to happen. If the board decides that we're going to have a reserve, that would be another issue that's not in the rate study now. In the rate study, there is no projection for growth. The plan is being based upon zero growth, so we're not assuming to getting any funds from connections or anything like that. It's just to keep us going. And as all enterprise funds, both water and wastewater, they must be supported by the rates. And if there's extra money in either of those funds, it can't be used for anything else. So maybe if for some reason we actually get more money in than we expend, which I don't expect it to happen, and even beyond our plan, we can start building up those funds in those enterprise funds to continue to support, a reserve. So that's mainly my reports.
All right. I, along with Director Pearson and Vice President Berenger, attended the Leadership Academy, the Special District Leadership Foundation Academy, which is funded by SDRMA, which provides us insurance, and the CSDA, which is this California Special District Association. They added a second track, so if you've already done the basic training, you can attend and get a more detailed on some different topics, or kind of dig deeper. And Vice President Berenger and I were both on that track. I agree, it was good to network and find that we are not. Our problems are not small, but we are also not alone in the problems that we have, and that there are other districts and electeds out there that are facing some of the same issues in the same size kind of districts and smaller, in some cities. So I always find it to be a rejuvenating. If anybody wants any additional information, I did bring my booklet, and I got certificates and lots of paper, government stuff, who figures? And I want to thank the community and the board and for having the foresight to have these training and have the board get trained, because it does reduce our liability insurance. They give us a discount for every board member that's trained, because it reduces the potential risks if boards know what they're doing and they don't make decisions that put the district at risk. So I wanted to compliment Director Farmer on the town hall and just kind of put a bug in the rest of the board's ear. I think it would be good if we were to have, not necessarily with Dean, but if we were to have more of those kind of informal discussions. I think it allowed, it was, well, you all were there, and it was broadcast by AGP. I think it was helpful for some people to have the ability to ask questions, and the fact that that Dean was kind of at the front of the room, so to speak, helps, because he's not a member of the community, but he does know sometimes all the things going on with the community, sometimes less. We did have a conversation, Vice President Berenger and I serve on the ad hoc legislative committee. We did have a discussion with Mr. Flores this morning on potential legislation that the district might want to support, and I think that there wasn't anything specific. We do have something on the consent agenda that we already passed to send a letter about a particular bill, but I think we determined there wasn't really a need to have a discussion at the board level, and that there's a few bills that we need to keep an eye on, but nothing that we would necessarily want to directly give the boards, hey, go and get this kind of thing. And that's just primarily because they could affect us, but there isn't enough of an impetus to go forward. The one thing that I did do after we did get off the phone is I sent an email, because I think that it might be good if we had somebody paying attention in Sacramento to how we're going to pay for the BRP. So, and it could be that some kind of legislation allowing us to do something or other that's different outside of the box, so to speak. And I don't even know what that would be, but I didn't want it to drop off the radar entirely, because that's a big expense that we're going to have to face at some point, or we're going to have to face people who want to build. So that's that. Those are my reports. Director Farmer.
I'm glad to hear that 3 of the 5 members of this board were able to attend the Leadership Academy training, and President Rice and I were fortunate enough to do that last year, and so I didn't see the need to do it again this year, although President Rice, she's just a little bit more, how could we say it, ambitious than I am. Plus I had some other obligations, so I was unable to attend, but I know how helpful and valuable it was for me, especially being the new person on the board like Director Pearson is at this point in time. So with regard to just the 2 very brief reports that I have, Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve, at their meeting they were talking about the boundary survey that's been going on for, I guess probably about 3 or 4 months now, maybe a little bit longer than that. It's probably going to be wound up by the end of this month, and that's a good thing. It's just to find out if, in fact, the survey that was done like 20 years ago, perhaps even a little more than that, if in fact it's accurate, or maybe some properties that are adjacent to the ranch are encroaching upon the ranch, whichever it is, and also all the information from this survey is going to be shared with our district, and that's at no cost to the district, so that's a cool thing. Also, I want to point out the fact that the Wildflower Show that's going to be taking place not this coming weekend, but the following weekend, April 28th and 29th, Saturday and Sunday. It's not necessarily a huge fundraiser for the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve. However, it's the one that's most enjoyable, I would have to say. Well, maybe the kitchen tour, but I would say the Wildflower Show is so awesome. It's one of the best in the state. And I would encourage everybody to show up. You make a little donation, and all that money goes to funding the ongoing work of Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch. And they need more volunteers to help out, especially the couple of days as well as the days of the event. And if you'd like to know more about that, you can either go to the Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve website, or what I would encourage is that you go to the Earth Day Green Space event this coming Sunday from 11 until 5 right there on Center Street. Fiscalini Ranch is going to be sharing a booth with the Forest Committee, and you can ask at that time, how you can help out with regard to the Wildflower Show. And also one more thing, there's going to be a Wildflower Walk on May the 6th with Doc Miller out there on the ranch. Doc Miller, one of the most knowledgeable people with regard to wildflowers and just everything environmental. He's been a long-time educator at Cal Poly, and he's the number one guy, the one go-to guy for setting up the Wildflower Show, as he has been since the Wildflower Show began. So I just want to encourage tapping in on that. With regard to the Forest Committee meeting, like I said, they're going to be sharing a booth at the Green Space Earth Day event this coming Sunday. Also, one more thing, Matt Ritter from Cal Poly, he's going to be the featured speaker at the June meeting on Wednesday the 13th with regard to the Forest Committee, which meets us over at Rabobank. And he's going to be talking about the diversity of trees and plants here on the Central Coast to emphasis on Cambria and the Monterey Pines. So if you're interested, the last time we had a speaker a couple of months ago in February, about 60 people showed up, and it was a very highly appreciated presentation, and I'm sure this one will be just as much. So maybe put that on your calendar for Wednesday, June the 13th, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Director Wharton?
Unfortunately, due to work constraints and timing of events surrounding my work and the pros meeting, I did not attend it this Tuesday. I don't know if Vice President Behringer attended and if he could report back. Well, the pros is first.
I didn't make it to the pros.
Okay. Yeah, the pros meeting. So I have nothing to report.
I do want to, we did confirm that there's going to be a Brown Act training at the meeting on the 26th and we've invited the other committee members of the infrastructure committee to attend that. Can you just speak a little more?
Yeah, that'll be the Finance Committee and the Infrastructure Committee new members need to go through Brown Act training, just so that everybody's aware of what can and cannot happen. So we have brought in counsel to do training for us, and that will begin at 10:30. So the Finance Committee meeting will start at 9 a.m. and will go until 10:30, and then the Brown Act training will go from 10:30 to probably 11:30, quarter to 12, is my guess. So that everybody's aware that, if you're looking for something after 10:30, it'll just be Brown Act training. So, thank you.
And where will that be taking place?
That will be at the fire station.
Fire station, thank you.
Yeah, that'll take place at the fire station at 10:30. And I appreciate Mr. Hirsch coming. Mr. Hirsch is coming to do the training, and I appreciate him coming to provide that training. One of the consent agenda items included expanding the conflict of interest statements, which is the Form 700, to include those people that are appointed to the standing committees. So we're trying to get it all straight, so to speak. All right. I think this would be the first time in a couple months we've had time for a general manager's report, and it's only 3:45, Mr. Gruber.
This is exciting. Look at the public.
You don't have to use all your time.
Look at the enthusiasm on the face of the public. Glad, yes, yay, that's Mike. Thank you, everybody. I'll be brief. One of the things the board asked me to cover, on this one is to make sure that the finance manager report covers more in-depth analysis of the costs associated with Funds 39 and 40 for the Sustainable Water Facility. So we have Rudy here and we have Bob here. One of the things that we're spending a little bit more time on, and I'm going to, Director Pearson talked about this from a policy perspective, is that mitigation money that we have set aside. We need about another month or so to reconcile those figures, although you'll see an amount mentioned. If you recall, that $1 million mitigation fund was set aside for mitigation for the Sustainable Water Facility. However, staff would like some more direction and really some more constraints on that money, if you will, especially if there is an opportunity in the future to maybe get reimbursed for some of our cost. The reason I bring that up is because if you look at the amount of mitigation money that's left, we originally anticipated using that money for legal cost and anything related to the EIR, and we've done a pretty good job with that. But I just want to safeguard those funds. So, as you can see in my first paragraph, we continue to evaluate the current water situation in Cambria. We monitor the San Simeon well field, the Santa Rosa well field, the WBE, which is a Windsor Bridge East monitoring well level, and our gradient. And as District Engineer Bob Greshams indicated, we really needed that late March, early April rain that we've got. It's been helpful, but as I indicated in my report, we're continuing to monitor, and by early summer, I'll be coming back to the board and talking about if we need to go into a more severe stage of conservation or water conservation to include anything else associated with that. Again, last month the board asked me, I think by consensus they supported four of my goals. But they said that I don't need to be the face of the community, but I'm still going to be the face of the community. But they asked me to come up and focus on administrative efficiencies, and there was some talk on public records requests. So I included as my fifth goal is focus on administrative efficiency. Some examples are to continue evaluating staff levels. Now, this is particularly relating to the administrative office, not the organization-wide. Reducing public records requests through utilization of the CCSD website. A willingness for the general manager to meet with community stakeholders. I think that goes a long way. We've met with Karen Dean on a couple different times and talked about the Sustainable Water Facility and the CIP list. So I think if I take the time and have an open door policy and willing to meet with constituents, that's going to be a mechanism in which to reduce the public records request. And we've seen a downtick in those a little bit. The recent formation of the two standing committees of finance and infrastructure, staff is hoping that many of the questions being requested to the public records request process will be significantly reduced. In addition to the implementation of Tyler Encode and the ability to generate more timely and accurate financial reports, information requested of the SWS can also be reduced. The new budget currently being formulated and implemented as part of the fiscal year 2018-19 year will also address many of the questions being asked of the public. There's a reoccurring theme, and rightfully so, regarding public records requests, and it's about the finances of the district, whether it's a sustainable water facility or CIP. So there's a core group of questions, and it's mostly the quick analysis that I did. It's really relating to our fiscal house. And so by implementing some of these things, we're hopefully reduce those. Cumulatively, all these improvements will hopefully result in a decline in public records requests. The board also asked for an update on the numerous what we call as NOIs, notices of intent grant applications, which have been applied for. And so what I did is I included all those, and I gave a thumbs up to Director Pearson and Chief and Haley for applying for some of those. We applied, and we've attached all the ones that we applied for. One thing I do want to bring to the board's attention is unfortunately we weren't successful again in the biomass facility. There's a letter in here letting us know that we weren't successful this second time around. Maybe the third time will be a charm. But any of the grants that we've applied for that require additional matching funds will need to come back to the board from a policy standpoint. Say if the 6 or 7 we applied for were successful in all of them, that doesn't necessarily mean we have to take them all or accept them all. It would really be based on our availability of revenues. But I'm happy that we're applying for them. And I also think it's important that we continue, as Senator Flores talked about, opportunities for infrastructure grants. We're staff's strong supporters of that. As indicated by the committee reports, we've had Finance Committee and infrastructure reports, our meetings, Finance once, infrastructure twice, great meetings. I think everybody's getting along really good, and I think that the public we had 14 at the infrastructure committee today. We're going to do boy girl next time though, because we had the committee members on this side and the public on this side, and I think it's kind of more important that we intermix, but I can't make that happen. So the other thing is the rate study. I got an email from Alex yesterday. He said, I apologize, I've dropped the ball on this, but we should be farther along in this process than we are, and I apologize. One thing I do want to talk about the rate study is this is not an independent study in and of itself, and I'll tell you why. We need to the extent possible, coordinate with the infrastructure committee and the budget committee and the rate study committee and the board as a policy. We need to make sure so some of the recommendations that'll be coming out of these committees really need to be brought forward as part of the rate study committee, so we're not working in a vacuum or working unilaterally. So I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as rates go. The Pros Commission continues to meet monthly. I attend those meetings. And the old schoolhouse, it's back on the, it's been on the agenda. It's an important issue for Pros right now. The board directed me to direct Pros to continue to work on this matter. And they're bringing back some additional information on at least 5 locations that have been identified for the possible future home of the schoolhouse. The CPO SWF position, we interviewed 2 people, and both very, very strong candidates. And we're in the process of really, I don't necessarily know that I would say negotiating with them. We're negotiating with them, and we're hopeful that at least one of them will accept the position and become part of our team and be our sustainable water facility. Both individuals were very, very qualified. One worked for Kern County Water District for about 35 years as a senior chief operator and had a grade T5, which is the highest you can have. And then the other young man works for Nacimiento Water District, which is a large surface water treatment facility. And he's in the process of getting his grade 4, T4. So, we went back out and we got 2 good candidates. And as soon as we seal the deal, if you will, with one of those individuals, we'll let the board know on that. Along those same lines, we went out for a T3 when Travis left. We didn't get a good response, unfortunately, and so what was suggested by Jason is why don't we give an internal candidate an opportunity? And so we did an internal recruitment for about a 2-week period of time, and we had Andy from the Facilities and Resources Department, who's just a really good guy. He applied for the position. He was interviewed, and he's accepted that position. We're not going to unilaterally transfer him over to the water department until we're started advertising for a facilities and resource person to take Andy's position. But Andy's going to be an OIT in the water department. He's already studying books and things like that. And then we'll have a new person to back up Carlos. We don't want to take somebody away from Carlos right now. We were issued the brine disposal permit from the South San Luis County Sanitation District. That's a 1-year permit. It was a renewal. It's not a new permit. So they've kind of been in a transition period lately with their new general manager and interims and contract employees and things like that. It didn't happen as quickly as I had wanted it to. Our agreement with them was up in February of this year, and I applied for it in early February. They did receive some letters of support, but they also received some letters of concern relating our disposal of brine in that facility. But remember, this is our best option right now. And then along those same lines, Bob and I are working on a request for proposal for off-hauling of the brine from the facility if and when we need to start that facility back up. We're continuing to remove water from the impoundment basin, and we're doing it 6 days a week, but we're filling the tank 7 days a week. Mr. Rocky from the Regional Water Quality Control Board wants us to be actively involved 7 days a week in that process and not just 5 days a week. And this is what I'm going to need some policy guidance on. I don't want to blindside the board. We're working on the fiscal year budget, but we're taking the same approach as we did last year, and that's zero-based budgeting. If you look at our net worth, if you will, a little over $2 million, I think it would be fiscally irresponsible to create a budget that would require us to, again, fund CIP projects that would further drain our reserves. Now, with that being said, there's a caveat associated with that. If we're successful and we get our new rates in place, then that new rate structure will support the projects that have been identified and need to be done. However, I don't want to assume those rates will be approved. But if they are approved, then we can always come back with a budget adjustment, a budget amendment, and ask the board to consider those. So that's where we're going, unless I get some different direction on the budget again. So I know I'm going to be asked, well, why didn't you put any money in the CIP? I can put money in the CIP, but again, the only source of revenue that we have right now would be from the general fund, and I want to really safeguard that general fund, and hopefully we'll get a new rate structure in place that'll support the things that we want to do. I did attend the chamber mixer, and I was also the guest speaker.
I think you have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Director Pearson.
Should we be, at this point in time, because he's working on the budget, should we give him a little bit more direction on that?
Absolutely.
At this point in time? I would like to see, yes, a zero-based budget, but I'd also like to see a list of things that he would recommend and his staff would recommend that would be added to the budget based upon the rate structure. Okay, if it came through, maybe you'd have a list for each of the enterprise and then one for the general fund as far as, okay, this would be the things that I would add. I guess it's just for the enterprise funds. It wouldn't affect the general fund, although we would be remiss in not reallocating the administrative department properly to the water and wastewater as part of the rate structure in order to free up some more money for the general fund. So I would like to see that if he can do that.
Yes, we can, and I'm sorry, Madam President, but for an example, we worked with John Olshan, and Bob and him worked till late last night on his budget. And we discussed it this morning. He said, I need, based on the CIP list, I need $1.1 million. So what we can do, it's really easy. We can do it both ways. And we'll be bringing a draft to you next month. I think that's a really good idea. And through resolution, you're going to adopt a budget however you see fit, and it could be a mixture of both those. But absolutely, the staff Jason has a list of things. We have budget appropriation forms this time, budget request forms, and John has a comprehensive list too. So I didn't want to be speculative or premature in saying this is the way we're going to go. I appreciate some guidance, and we can do it both. We can do it both ways. What's interesting about the list that's being proposed, at least from the wastewater infrastructure perspective right now, is it's consistent with the CIP master list. It shows about $1.1 million in improvements. So we can bring that forward too, and at least have a discussion about it instead of saying no, we're not going to do it, and we're going to have a zero-based budget approach. So we can do it both ways. I think it's important that conversation happen earlier than later, and we can do that next month if that's the consensus of the board.
The draft, both of these then would be ready for the Finance Committee meeting on May 10th. Is that correct?
I don't think
that still.
I think we went back to square one.
Put your microphone on.
Yeah, after the committee meeting, we went back to square one. It's going to take a little bit longer to finalize the proposed budget. It's a whole new format, and it's very different from prior years. It's more comprehensive, in my opinion. It's more transparent, but it's taking us a little bit longer, and that's what we plan to.
What we can do is the items, let's focus on just water and wastewater right now, because that's the big budget, concern, the CIP. We have that information. I know that everybody has their budgets in. So from a budget standpoint, yes, we can get the finance committee that information, and you can have a discussion on it.
We might be able, I can't speak for the committee, but at our 26th meeting next week, we could ask them if they wanted to push it back until the 17th or something like that, give you another week at least to develop that even further. So why don't I put that to the committee and see if that works, to give you an extra week. That
would be appreciated. And what I don't want, it doesn't have to be, this is what I tell staff, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. It doesn't have to be a completely finished budget or no, we don't have it done, so we can't provide you anything. I already have the wastewater budget in my hand. Jason's already finished the water department budget with the needs that he's identified for his departments. And so we can have that as an attachment to the finance committee agenda, and you can discuss it and review it. And I think that's, so to say we're not going to have the whole budget, we don't want to review the whole budget, it's several hundred pages long. But you do want to review the most critical components of it, and that's the infrastructure part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Madam President.
Isn't wastewater lacking some personnel too that should be on a enhanced, let me say, budget that we might be able to put through?
Yes, there's what we created this year as part of the budget process is a budget request form. And on that budget request form is for items that you need, that you need to have. But there's also a justification portion in there. So you're correct. We want to add 2 additional people to the wastewater treatment plant, the wastewater treatment department, specifically for collections. We know that our collection system is in need of some additional attention, and so we want to be able to start with those 2 people on the Vector truck. Eventually, we want to get a new Vector truck, but the collection system needs 2 people. If you look at the collection system, it's a separate department, if you will, even though it's part of the wastewater department. And because of budget constraints and things like that, we really haven't viewed it as that. But there still is a lot to do out in the wastewater department from the collection system side. So you're correct, Director Pearson. We have 2 people we're going to add to that department. And President Rice, I'm sorry.
Vice President Barringer.
Yes. I don't like kicking the can down the road. One of the things that came up at this morning's meeting is what's the difference between maintenance and capital improvements. And the CIP list that we were looking at combines them both. And over the next some months, we're going to try and fix that and be able to make those divisions. And you were there. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to kick the rate study down the road at all. I believe that when President Rice wasn't in on that call, but we sat down with Alex Handler, and he's pretty well set. He doesn't care whether it's a panel or it's doing a video of the collection system. He said, we said, is about a $1.1 million over the next extended period of time. And for the water department, from the numbers that you provided us and the water department provided you, about $750,000 a year. Those 2 numbers is really all he said he's ready to do something as early as May.
Good.
And so I don't want us to not continue with the rate study, and I think the Finance Committee should have two scenarios. One, that the Prop 218 is passed or it isn't passed. And the more that the public knows that you're talking almost $2 million a year that's needed to keep those enterprise funds solvent, I think that even though the number is going to be pretty high, the increase, but it's only for water and wastewater. And some people look at the CSD as spending too much money. I think it's very clear they might spend too much money on some things, but the water and wastewater department have been starved for a long time. So I think the ratepayers will step up to the point. And if we need to save money, we save it from some other places, because the enterprise funds need to be self-sufficient. And if the public knows for sure that not a dollar that's left over in those enterprise funds will ever be spent on cookies or additional admin staff, then I think that it'll go through. So, and President Rice, after this meeting, or as soon as possible, I think we need to make sure that staff doesn't slow down or I'm not saying you're slowing it down, but the expectation of May being the beginning of Prop 218 is critical, because we want to have something in place starting next fiscal year. We don't want to start by robbing the general fund.
Yeah, I hear that loud and clear from the board, especially from Director Pearson and from you. So what we did is I'll be on vacation, but I'll still have my computer. Prior to this meeting, I've already asked Monique to schedule a rate study ad hoc committee meeting, another one with Alex. What I really want to do is have this on the May agenda for you. I mean, I really want to have the rate study. We talked about an option A and B. So we're full speed ahead. You're right. Alex is to the point where he can bring this forward and have a discussion with the board, get some direction from the board. And we can always, if there's a consensus and the board agrees, we can turn right back around, work with District Council on the Prop 218 process, hold a special board meeting early June, and then that 45-day period starts. So we're working really hard on this, and we know it's really important, and we need to get it in place. And so I'd like it on the agenda for May.
On the issues of getting some direction from the board and or the finance committee regarding budget policies, in my understanding is, other than what is the law relating to water rates, water department, wastewater rates, that department, that we don't really have a set of policies guiding how we do the allocations for admin allocation, that we still don't really have a solid interfund loan payback policy. And what I would kind of suggest that the finance committee maybe take a look at is, what are these kinds of things that will help the GM get direction. And it could be that my understanding was, when we talked about the your goal 3, General Manager Gruber, on page 133,
yes, ma'am,
was that we weren't going to go for the Distinguished Budget Award this first year.
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was the case. But I do know that the GFOA has a really good set of suggested policies for doing budgeting, and I think that the folks on the finance committee are very well qualified in their understanding of finance, and I think that we could hit the ground running in terms of helping give direction to staff through the board by looking at which of these budgeting policies. And so, Mr. Gruber, one of the things that would be helpful to the finance committee would be to help us. Where are the places where you really need the direction? Like, do we really have the capacity to spend $750,000 a year in the water department to do projects? I know we have that many projects to do, but do we have the staffing so that we don't end up at the end of the year, we couldn't get to this one because we don't have enough people?
Well, that's a very good question, and if you recall, prior to me coming on board, we had reserves, and we've talked about this, and it's because staff identified projects, but they did not get to them, so it built the reserves up. I don't necessarily know of course, I want to get projects done. But from a funding perspective, I don't necessarily know that's a bad thing, because what we're doing is, if we can't get to a project, which I want to be able to get to a project, if we can't get to it as staff, then we look at other alternatives on how we can get the project done through outside sources. But what's the most important component of is, those are enterprise funds and those are safeguarded. And so you're building, if you will, a nest egg and instead of deferring, I rather, if we generate $750,000 a year for the water fund, and we've identified projects over a 10-year financial plan that indicate we need that much money, and in that first year we don't get all the projects done, well, then I'm going to have to evaluate our staffing levels to see how we can get them accomplished. But it's not like that money's going to go away. It's going to be, those reserves are going to be built up again. And that's the most important part, because sometimes on the CIP list there may be priorities that shift. There may be regulatory or environmental requirements. As I indicated to the Infrastructure Committee this morning, that there is certain work associated with projects, whether it's environmental and engineering and things like that. So to answer your question, I think that we can get $750,000 a year of work done with the existing staff that we have. However, with the caveat, if we don't get it done, I don't necessarily know that it's a bad thing. We'll have to reevaluate why we're not getting it done, but at least we'll have the revenues in place and start building up our reserves, and then we won't be having this conversation about zero-based budgeting and whether we want to do this project or not do this project, because we'll have a revenue stream. And I think that's, it's amazing, because it seems like the entire community, based on what I'm hearing and what I'm experiencing at the standing committee meetings, that they understand the importance of the infrastructure, and they seem to be all on board. And so it's just a matter of, and I'm thinking both sides, whatever side you're on or not side you're on, I think everybody supports the infrastructure needs of the community. Now, whether that equates to support of the rates that will be proposed, I don't know. But your question, I think, is a good question, but I'd rather have the revenue sources in place and then figure out, if we can't get the projects done through maybe contract services or something, how we can get the projects done.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. And I just want to point out that the rate ad hoc committee is made up of one person that's on the infrastructure committee and one person that's on the finance committee, which is hecka convenient.
I just wanted to mention that Director Pearson did interrupt the general manager for this very important issue, and I'm glad we got it on the table and talked about it. However, I do have some questions on the manager's report when he's finished.
I just have one other item, and that's it. Oh, by the way, I'm still going to be attending things, whether you want me to or not. I don't think that's what you told me, but you just don't want me to the face. You rather pick another face, so that's fine. So I did attend a chamber mixer. I was a guest speaker at the American Legion, which really enjoyed. And I have that I was spoke to the realtors. I was sick that day. I stayed home and worked from home. But I am scheduled to speak at the Lions Club in May. And the things that I'll be talking about to these groups are the very things we're talking about right now. I think with you folks continuing to be out in the public, I know you work really hard. You're out there all the time. With me being out there, making sure that I'm talking about your message, your policies, not mine. And I think with the standing committees, I think that it's going to be a unified message, and I think it's going to help improve transparency of the district and kind of a unified communication on the direction we're going. So,
just a question on the chamber mixer. Wasn't that the same night as the town hall? Or are you talking about this in
month before?
March?
Yeah, the month before.
We're lagged by a month.
It was.
2 weeks ago feels like a year ago. So, Vice President Behringer?
I have some questions on the general manager's report, but maybe I need some help with Director Pearson and yourself. There's an acronym called SMART, specific, measurable, and then what's the A stand for? There you go. Specific, measurable, achievable, R and T. Anyway, I did know realistic and something. Timing. Okay. Anyway, nonetheless, timing. I looked at the goals that you have, and in number 1, there's the word timeline for startup, and there's another. On number 2, there's a timeline. Number 3, there's a calendar. Number 4, there's a timeline, and number 5 is it doesn't have the smart things, but at least it's better than. It doesn't have the smart acronym, but it's better than what was there before. I just want to bring up the fact that the special districts. There's one of the bills that is looked at by Balanced Public Relations is that internet websites are going to be required by 2020. Every independent special district will maintain a website that clearly lists contact information, etc. And I think that's going to as much as you can roll that technology into it. It will save our requests for documents. And please try and, we put documents on there, they aren't drafts or clearly decided that, because there's some are facts and some are wishes. But if people can see what the facts are, I think it's extremely important. So that would just be a focus that I would ask you to do. I talked about the rate study and how important that is to do. And a lot of times people list activities, and I'd rather see accomplishments, not activities. So, a lot of these bullet points and the length of the report itself could be restricted a little bit. Just say what you've achieved, not what you did. On the other hand, also what assistance is needed or direction. In other words, in your report, I'd like to say, I didn't do this because I need that. Help me. As opposed to a bunch of bullet points. So that's just a general comment. I noticed that there's a new stone bench being built along the Bluff Trail, and I think that's FFRP motivated and funded, I guess. But I don't know how Carlos is involved in that. And again, at the Vets Hall, 28 events were held, and a while ago we wanted to know if there's any profit involved or what the income is. And I'd rather put that off to June or July if you want, but that's something I'd like to see in the future, is whether we're losing money on the whole thing. And I understand that a lot of the things that you do are more costly here than elsewhere. I think the public should understand that. There's a penalty for being in the coastal zone from one perspective, but there's also the penalty for being in the coastal weather patterns and the salt, etc. So
there's also a benefit for being in the coastal zone, is that it's beautiful.
It's very beautiful. So, and one extremely small, I've got this historic graph that has become incomprehensible, no matter how nice it is, its color. So, on these two sides, this sheet of paper it's double-sided. Hey, now we're making some progress. But this one that's more comprehensive, last 7 years, that's fine. And Santa Rosa Creek, it's good to see. But please, this one, kill it. Other than that,
There's one real quick thing on page 140. It shows new electrical pole box. They should be flipped around, rusted. So that's dyslexia on my part. Yeah, Director Wharton brought that to my attention. So, and then also regarding the websites and the CSDA, I scheduled a meeting yesterday with the CSD representative, the field agent, if you will. And we discussed a lot of different things, but I requested a packet for each of you. He'll be sending them to me on all the benefits associated with our membership for CSDA. And I'm also in the process of providing him some information on the sustainable water facility. So he wants to, on the monthly CSDA magazine, he wants to run a story on the sustainable water facility. So I'm going to get him some information on that. So I did meet with the CSDA representative. Then one last thing, all the other department manager reports are included. I kind of did, Director Behringer's right, I kind of did an overkill on the Fiscalini tank. I apologize about that, but just a lot of information that maybe doesn't need to be included, but I'd rather provide you too much than not enough. And any other questions? I know probably Director Farmer and Director Rice have some.
Director Farmer, I just want to follow up on the website. This is you can't see it because they printed it in yellow, but it's the District Transparency Certificate of Excellence, and I'm not suggesting that we go for this right now, but there is a big list on the back. Half of this back page is website requirements to meet the transparency certificate.
We meet a
standards?
lot of the requirements. If I could get a copy of that
Yeah,
from you.
you can have,
we've
you can
talked
have
about
this
that.
copy, that's why I
Yeah.
got it, because I think that there's some suggestions on there that might be helpful in update, like it should be easy to find the agendas.
I don't think it's going to
I've
be.
been going to that site for I can't even know how long, and you know how long it took me the first time to try and figure out where those darn agendas were?
Yes, I know.
Should be a link on the homepage. So, and that's what that list is. It's, I'm not saying that we need to get the certificate right now from CSDA, but I think it's a good suggested list of how we,
I think it's a
how we
great.
can
I think it's a
improve.
great idea. We've talked about it, and
Thank you.
I don't think it'd be that much effort on staff's part.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a lot of what is on that recommended already on there.
Right.
It's just difficult to find.
Absolutely.
And I really think that you need to maybe engage with a new website software or something, because I've heard
Yeah.
that it's very difficult to work with, and it is very difficult to find things on. And right now, I was out there today, and there's this pop-up that keeps coming
Yeah.
up that says that some of the
I got it
files may
too.
be missing or somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it just irritates me.
Okay.
And Don's going, yes, it irritates him. So we need to maybe look at, okay, transitioning to something else at some time
Yes,
next
absolutely.
year.
Or someone else.
Yes,
Yeah.
somewhere else. I don't know.
Okay.
All right, Director Farmer, and then Director Wharton.
Thank you. I noticed under the general manager, first off, on page 136, and the general manager is alluding to the meetings that he's had, and I noticed down here under engineering department, it says, met with the district engineer and general manager. So, but I... Oh, cool. All right, good.
Bob talking in his first person, he does that a lot.
Okay, cool. So getting back to page 133, my apologies there, but the first page, 133, and at the bottom of the first paragraph, where it says, staff will be making a recommendation in early summer regarding what appropriate stage of water conservation the board should consider. In other words, with regard to it being implemented out there for the residents. And I just want to reiterate this, once again, that we as a district should be encouraging as many opportunities for water use and reuse and catchment, whatever you want to call it, in the community all year round. And I say that for two reasons. Number one, because our district during the drought, or the residents of this community, I should say, during the drought indicated that we became one of the most, if not the most, water conservation-minded communities in the entire state of California. So we already have this reputation out there. And I feel if we as a district could encourage more, like I say, more of this, more water use and reuse, because right now, with regard to especially state agencies that we can maybe gain funding from in the long run, if they see how active this district and therefore this community is in being as forward-looking as possible with regard to water in the 21st century, the better opportunity we will have to get funding for the needs that we have regarding water and wastewater. So I really want to, I think I brought this up before, but I'm just going to really emphasize it right now, that we need to have a very holistic approach to the future with regard to water use in this community, and therefore the funding we can get around anything that has to do with water, like I say, with water, with wastewater. It's all very interconnected. That's just my humble opinion. So I just want to say that. And it's not about waiting until early summer for some kind of a stage. It's an all year round process of making us getting the community more involved and us being more involved in water use and reuse. Also on the next page, where it's down maybe about a third down, where it says, staff conducted, interview for the CPO position for the water facility. I'm glad this was brought up, because what I wanted to highlight was, first off, we don't know if and when this facility is going to operate. hiring somebody right now, well, it's nice to know that you have the opportunity to maybe get somebody with 35 years of experience. I mean, that sounds good. However, and what you also brought up is, we just lost a very valuable employee in water who, and I don't want to beat let's put it this way, a gasping horse, but we had an employee who, a very hardworking, knowledgeable employee who was gaining knowledge and information, gaining knowledge with regard to how to run the water facility, and he resigned. I just wish we had made more of an effort to retain him, but that's another story, because he also had, historical institutional knowledge with regard to water. I think, and I'm glad to know that we have obtained somebody from Carlos' department who is going to be involved in water. I think it would be really cool if we could get somebody with more experience, and that might not be that easy, but more experience to work in water, especially because there's going to be an employee in water who's going to be resigning in the fall, who's been around for a number of years, who has a lot of institutional experience. It would be nice if we could plug those folks in first. I think they're more of a priority than having to hire somebody to operate a facility that isn't running when water is running 24/7. That's just my humble opinion on that. And if I could just, and I do want to reiterate this. We talk about a revenue source. And, it was brought up this morning at the infrastructure meeting that the main revenue source that we can probably depend on in the long run are two: increasing water rates and selling water meters. And that was brought up, and I feel like the main way that we can gain financial, some additional financial assistance is, like I said, from what I just said, being forward-looking, having state funding agencies that see what we're doing and getting money from those folks, as opposed to burdening the community over and over with regard to rate increases and growing out this town by selling water meters. That's just my humble opinion. And if also, since your staff continues to remove water from the impoundment basin, since we just had 5 inches of rain over a couple of days, a couple of weeks ago, I'm wondering if we can get an update with regard to the impoundment basin and how things are going there. I guess I just brought up two things as opposed to getting a response to my first ongoing presentation.
Yeah. Well, we're still achieving evaporation out there. The weather's been favorable when it's not raining. On a good day, we'll get half an inch of evaporation out of that pond. So the rains that we had, you're referring to an extended period of time where we got that 5. I don't know if it was 5 inches, but if you say it was 5
inches. It was roughly 5 inches over 48 hours. Yeah.
So that was added about 450,000 gallons to the pond, further diluted water that's already in there. That has to be pumped out, but it's part of the process. We test for boron, and the boron concentrations have been very, very low, and we continue to pump the pond. I think Bob can comment. I think it's about 17,000 gallons a day or so. And it's not going to be an overnight process. You're not going to drive by and see the pond lowered it by a whole lot every day. But the most important part is that we're abiding by the terms and conditions associated with the cease and desist order. And that's what the Regional Water Quality Control Board really wants to see. We have no control over the rain nor the amount of water that goes into the pond. So as long as we continue, we're heading into the dry season now, as long as we continue to remove water from it, I think we'll be okay. I think it's an unrealistic expectation to think it's going to be emptied in a relatively short period of time, but at least we're making progress. For the CPO position, that position was budgeted starting in January of this fiscal year, and we haven't filled it yet. But there is so much associated with that facility. Title 22, Title 27, the sampling, the reporting, all those things, the calibration. And so bringing somebody on in advance is really a good idea. What we don't want to do is bring somebody on a month before we start that facility, and that individual, if one of those two individuals chooses to come to work for us, will have the opportunity to work with Bob and Melissa and myself, and to really understand the complexity of this system. And then they'll have a good foundation, so when the system starts, they'll feel comfortable with operating the system. So it's just a matter of thinking ahead. We're in April now, April to May, June, July, August, September. You know, the person's probably going to take a month to get on board, and they're going to have, you know, the water department right now, in addition to the wastewater department, are doing a lot of the tasks associated with maintaining that facility, especially the closure plan and the cease and desist order. So a lot of those duties will go to that person, and also you could sit that person down probably starting tomorrow with the Title 22 and Title 27 reports, the permits, and they could read them every day between now and the day we start it, and there's probably still something they wouldn't catch. Every time I read those reports, Bob and I kind of chuckle. Every time we read our permits, we catch something different that we didn't know about before. So it's going to be a long time process, and hopefully it'll work out for us. But not hiring somebody right now, I don't think is in our best interest. We need to be prepared when we start that. And remember, the person that we do hire, that person will be involved in all kinds of things other than the operation of the facility, the sampling requirements, the reports, all those things. So it's a full, as I indicated earlier, I think our biggest mistake is underestimating the staffing requirements of this facility. If you go back to February and we were late on, 54 reports, and I think we underestimated what that facility requires. And but now we've identified the staffing needs, and so we're moving forward with that. And with regard to your other thing, I'm not even going to comment on that because that's a personnel matter, and you got your opinion, and you share at every board meeting, and I'm going to continue to say it's a personnel matter, and I'm not going to discuss it with you. So.
Director Wharton was next. Did you have a follow-up on this?
I just, real quick, I just wanted to make sure that the public and the infrastructure committee, it was my perception that even though someone from the public might have mentioned growth was not considered in any of our figures. There was no discussion that we're going to sell water meters or that was going to be part of the income. The rate study is also based on zero growth. So it seemed like there was a mischaracterization that was one of the things we were looking at. Unless I'm wrong, I believe that the committee was unanimous on not considering growth as part of the financial structure.
I just want to say that it was mentioned. Okay,
was mentioned, but the board did not consider that as an area of approach. You're right.
All right.
Somebody from the public did mention.
No, somebody from staff did
mention.
And just
yes. Oh, I see where you're going. Okay,
just to clarify my position on meters. It's a revenue stream. I look at it as a revenue stream. I don't have a policy position on this. That's Mr. Director Farmer is absolutely right. That's the board's decision on that. It's not.
It's a dry stream right now.
Yeah, it is. So as I said, I also said in the meeting today, I don't care if we have a bake sale. I want money for our capital improvements, and so it's whatever we can do. So I look at it strictly from a revenue source. I don't look at it from a growth, pro-growth. I don't get involved in the politics of things. I just want money to be able to do what we need to do, however that may be. So if somebody wants to play the lotto and give us the $13 million they win, that would be great too. So
okay, Director Wharton's okay. Corrected standing. Thank you for your patience, Director Wharton.
You're very welcome. To offer a counterpoint to Vice President Behringer's observation of these were activities that were done versus accomplishments, you could look at it and say, look how busy the staff is as well. I'm not saying that it should be this way every time, but when you look through and you see Haley on almost every other line, and how many Haleys do you have in staff? I mean, yeah, exactly. So just to offer a counterpoint that, these are good, not to fill up pages, but they're good to see what the staff is doing as well. I appreciate seeing how busy they are and what they are doing. So whether or not you want to continue doing that, that's up to you guys. But I appreciate seeing them, but I could also see where that's quite a bit of pages burned up just to
I do have some comments.
Are you finished? Okay. Director Pearson, I'm sorry I didn't realize that it was a reaction to something somebody had said. I remembered it. Director Pearson.
Thank you. I'm going to start in support of Director Farmer, and I've noticed that the production of water is going up, and so the conservation obviously is going down. Now, part of that is because we're out of stage 3 and we're in stage 2, and people are allowed to do some landscape watering, I believe, and some other things and that kind of thing. And one of the things that I saw in the CSDA magazine is a partnership that they did up in Riverside to show people how to plant a sustainable landscape. And I think maybe what we could do is partner with Greenspace and find a CCSD plot somewhere and do a demonstration of exactly what it looks like and show people exactly what's going on and how to do a good landscape. I know my wife and I are currently landscaping our new place, and we are trying to put exactly what we can put out there that doesn't need water and also doesn't have the wrong kind of plants that are invasive, that will, because we're close to the ranch, it'll go out on the ranch, and then I have to go out there and help them dig them out. So,
on that point, if I might just interject, the water conservation program, the water efficiency program that we passed in 2013 does have. That's part of that program. That policy includes something like that, and I know there's been a couple people in town that have done those kind of. But I would definitely, for one, welcome that kind of program.
I think this was a great little thing that they did. I mean, it probably didn't cost a whole lot of money, but it allows people to see exactly how to do a landscape properly for our climate instead of putting things in there that we shouldn't have. And the other thing along with that is if we're going to ask people to conserve, and I think you brought this up before, Director Farmer, that when we do the rates, we ought to make, if they're using excess water above and beyond what they're allocated, that there is the penalty, and that penalty is larger than I think that it is currently today. Okay? And maybe that's something that the ad hoc committee can look at when you're doing the rate study. If people are staying within their allocation, good job. Okay? If they're not, then we need to penalize them some more. So the other thing that I have is on grants. I think we need some discussion, and I'll have that first with the general manager in the next couple of weeks. But I went out at the suggestion of Mr. Greshams, I went out to a place called eCivis, which is a grant organization that helps you find grants and do things with grants and write grants, et cetera, et cetera. They have a very nice little software package that I got a demonstration on that is $4,500 per year that we will then be able to go out there and customize for ourselves. So anytime that a grant comes up for wastewater, water, fire, parks, whatever, it will send an email to someone on staff, and we will be able to then look at it and see if it is worthwhile for us to go after. So I'm going to be bringing that to the general manager for maybe it's time to get on board with that eCivis software and just assign somebody to be looking at that in the future. So, yeah, I'll give you the information. I'll send it to you.
Director Farmer.
I'll try to make this as brief as possible. Following up on what I was saying earlier, with regard to being forward-looking, entering the 21st century and taking a really hands-on, proactive approach to water use and reuse, perhaps the board could consider having a standing committee for that very same thing. I realize we already have an infrastructure committee. I realize that Dean is already up there in Sacramento, connecting with various agencies. But it might not hurt if we had people from the community, like I say, and 2 members of the board, be on a water, whatever we would call it, a water, I can't think of a title of it right now, but just investigating what opportunities there are out there for making the best use of the water that we have. And therefore, like I say, it would show that we are even more proactive, and therefore, as I say, attracting the attention of various agencies and say, oh, look, these people are doing a hands-on job more than other communities. We'll assist them financially. I just want to plug that in. So maybe having another, like I say, another committee might be useful in that area.
You can suggest that at future agenda items.
Thank you.
Add. I think the general manager's probably done. Did you have something else? Okay. And I think that what I heard during this discussion was that the Finance Committee would like to hear what kind of places where you need some direction regarding the budget. And I heard some things that the Infrastructure Committee is going to be addressing, and let's make sure we get those things into the agendas. I know Vice President Berenger is the chair of the Infrastructure Committee, and
so Rudy and staff know to make sure that the budgets that we have so far with the wish list from both the supervisors are included in the Finance Standing Committee's agenda packet.
let's be clear about what we're going to be doing with it too, so that we don't.
Absolutely. A lot of moving parts, but we'll take care of it.
Thank you. I think we are, Mr. Hernandez, I think we are to the Finance Manager's report.
Thank you. And we also have District Engineer Bob Gresham. So Rudy will go over the overall financial picture of the district. We also wanted to make sure that we cover any questions related to Fund 39 and Fund 40. What we did is we went through and reconciled every expenditure for the Sustainable Water Facility. And I think that the information you have in your board packet, although Director Pearson said he wasn't a little fuzzy on some of it, but that's okay, because we want to make sure that we are answering the questions that the board wants. So turn it over to Rudy. Board, do you want to hear specifically just about the SWF and that, or do you want the overall financial situation of the district and then go into that? What's the board's desire? I know it's getting late, but we have plenty.
Whichever is less painful.
Less painful.
Well, Rudy's like me. He doesn't present things shortly. So I'll ask Rudy to go over the overall financial picture of the district, which, and then 5 minutes, and then we'll go into the Sustainable Water Facilities with Bob Gresham's helping out on that. Thanks, Rudy. Go ahead. Thank you, Madam President.
Before you begin, respectfully, if you could just speak slowly.
Okay.
So that people, I had some folks that had a hard time understanding. I know you were nervous last time, so.
Okay.
This is good information. I want to hear it.
Yeah, good afternoon, President Rice and members of the board and our public. No. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I do at times speak kind of fast, and I don't take it personal. Okay, but anyway, the first item I have is financial statements for the month of February of 2018. And what I'd like to do is refer the board to page 238. Okay, and this is what's called the one-page snapshot. And basically, this report gives a summary of all the activity for the month of February, I should say through the month of February for this current fiscal year, which is July 17 through February of 2018. And this report has been presented to the board previously, okay? But in a nutshell, what it basically does, it shows the first column, which describes what type of fund we're talking about, whether it be general fund, wastewater fund, and enterprise funds like water and water fund, SFW, and things like that. That's the first column. Then to the right, you have what's called the second column, which shows the revenue. And there you have it, folks, all there. And then further to the right, next column is the expenditures. And the last column is referred to as change to fund balance. And that basically equals revenues minus expenses equals changes to fund balance. Okay, so that's the format that the report is presented on. What I'd like to do is just give a brief line total. If you look at the general fund, the total revenues through February of 2018 are $3,352,10. That's through February of 2018. Expenditures are $3,469,490, which leaves a shortfall of $117,480. So that's the general fund. Wastewater is, as you can see, $1,439,835, and expenditures $1,443,066 for a shortfall of $3,231. And I'm just going to summarize all the water funds. If you look at the last column under overseas departments, it shows total water funds $2,377,436. Expenditures $2,602,602 for a net shortfall of $255,165. But I'd like to emphasize, folks, is this particular the last section, every enterprise fund is independent. What I'm saying is the water operating fund is very independent from the wastewater fund. So I think that's all I'm going to present on this page. Board have any questions on this particular section of my report?
So this is fiscal year to date.
Correct.
So we're essentially have spent $225,000 more than we brought in the water department, in the water enterprise?
Yes, of all the water enterprise funds. That's correct.
Okay.
And if you look at the report, the one that's really, I'm going to say, in deficit position, which we'll talk about later on, is the water fund SWF operating fund. That's the one that's showing a negative 366,899. On the other hand, if you look at the water operating fund, it's actually showing a positive balance of 141,734. So I just want to emphasize that. So if the board doesn't have any questions, I guess my next step, like our general manager mentioned about just making a snapshot, if you have any questions on any of the reports I presented, you have a general fund, you have a water operating fund, and so forth. What
are we going to be doing about the fact that we have already spent $345,000 more than we've brought in?
I think a lot of the expenditures, again, have to do with the closure plan and the cease and desist order. I sent an email out to the board kind of outlining why we went from 4.2 to $2 million. And just on the closure plan alone, the cease and desist order, we've spent about $300,000. That's on all the swale work and all the mitigation work and all the work that we spent. So that's behind us now. Also, I did mention in the email, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but when the SWF, Sustainable Water Facilities rates were established, the criteria for establishing those rates were information obtained from CDM Smith. Mm-hmm. And it was information based on although this is a one-of-a-kind facility, on other reverse osmosis plants, electrical costs, chemical costs, staffing costs, things like that. And we took those figures and we went forward with them because at that time, that's the best information we had. The challenge associated with that was prior to the issuance of the Title 22 and Title 27 reports, as I mentioned in an email to the board. And from the conditions associated with both those permits, there is where the disparity started, if you will. that the cost associated with operating that facility, because of those permits and the sampling requirements, the revenue generated did not support the operation of that facility. Now, your question, going back to your question, Madam President, what are we doing about it? I think those big ticket items, although we're going to have some costs associated with setting up brine disposal, the tanks and trucking and things like that, is to, first of all, address the conditions associated with the permit, and that's the sampling. That's one of our biggest expenses. The second thing is that once we close that pond down, once we get it emptied, there'll be a cost associated with that. But we'll be able to surrender, if you will, our Title 27 permit and our our performance bond or bond, whatever you want to call it, which is about $74,000 a year. But then there's going to be a cost associated with hauling that brine to South County Sanitation District. So, I guess that's the answer. We're continuing to spend a lot of money on that facility. I think we've had some conversations outside the boardroom here regarding on how we can possibly recoup some of those funds, and I think we're heading in a good direction regarding that. But though that's the major cost associated with it. We agreed to the cease and desist order. We agreed to the terms and conditions associated with the Title 22 and Title 27 reports, but we do need to continue to try to evaluate ways to save money.
And I would suggest that maybe that's also an area where the board could be helpful in terms of what are we going to do about the fact that the advanced water treatment facility that we built is kind of sucking money away from the rest of the water system, because it's all one system, water and wastewater, even though they're separate enterprise funds. I think that this goes back to the interfund loans, and how are we going to address the fact that we don't want to draw down all of the money that we have set aside over the years just because we keep going over. But I know why it's happening. I want to know how we're going to stop it happening.
In the rate study, if you remember, when the board approved the contract, the agreement with Bartle Wells, there was three components, actually four components, and one component that you decided not to move forward with was evaluating the costs associated with future connection fees, because you didn't think from a policy standpoint the timing was right, and I agree with you on that. But they are looking at water rates, wastewater rates, and current SWF operating cost rates too. So that's going to be a policy decision that the board's going to need to make, whether those rates stay the same or if they're adjusted slightly upward. One thing about a Prop 218 process is you can always adjust rates upward to meet your operational cost expenses. And if you ever want to do it again, you've got to go back out for a Prop 218. But you always have and correct me if I'm wrong, you can lower rates. So let's say if we come up with a proposed rates to adjust the sustainable water facility rates slightly upward based on the cost to run that facility, knowing what we know now, and we find out later on that we're able to reduce our sampling and we're able to cut cost, the board can always come back and say, okay, we've leveled out now, we're generating more revenue than it costs us to operate that facility, and through a resolution, the board can reduce the rates back to an acceptable level. Anytime you want to raise rates, that's through a Prop 218 process. Anytime you want to lower rates, you have the authority to be able to do that unilaterally as a governing body. So just wanted to, but there's a lot of cost associated with it. You're right.
Did you have presentation on 39 and 40, or you just want questions?
Well, there is a financial report prepared for the board and our public, and as Jerry mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, staff, myself, our engineer, and four of us, we spent a great amount of time auditing every expenditure from July 1st all the way through February of 2018. So I can stand here with a high level of confidence and say these are good numbers. Bob looked at them, I looked at them, and so the numbers you're seeing have been audited, and And as I stated in my staff report, the revenues for that particular fund are
The last two.
608,427 revenues. Expenditures, on page 238, Board, page 238. Expenditures are 975 for 975,327 for a shortfall of 366,899. So we have a shortfall through February. And Bob, our engineer, is going to give a presentation on more of the operational aspects of the fund. Bob, or funds 39 and 40.
Thank you, Rudy. Madam President, members of the board, I don't have a very formal presentation. I can just summarize what's written in the tail end of the
You've
finance
only got
discussion.
an hour.
But basically, as Rudy mentioned, we look in detail at the various invoices and costs that have occurred to date. And what happened at the start of the fiscal year budgeting, we didn't think the SWF was going to operate at all. So it was originally set up with an operating Fund 40, which was never carried forward in the budgeting process. So everything was getting charged to 39, and then there were some 40 charges, and it was all kind of confusing. So with Rudy's guidance, we've separated the costs, and with the input from staff, John Olshin and others, we were able to come up with a summary table that you see here on page 249 of the agenda packet. But basically, what staff did is we came up with a fund 39, which was now operating cost, and a fund 40, which is the capitalized cost. And so, again, we tried to eliminate certain accounts, like I think at the last meeting, Director Farmer asked about the lab cost. We had a 691 and 691H. Now, you won't see the 691H. It's all 691. So we try to simplify it where possible. And then we took the amount that was in the future mitigation measures, and that was to come out of the loan proceeds. So we separated that out on that page 260 to show revenue from loan proceeds. That was the $733,948 remaining of that original $1 million set aside for that purpose, for mitigation measures. Then under expenditures, we showed a new line item, which we're trying to get onto your next board agenda, is a Section 7 Endangered Species Act consultation for some consulting work on that. We'd estimated that roughly at $125,000. So we lowered the mitigation measure by that same amount to get that to balance out. So we have a revenue of $733,948 and then an expense of $733,948. As we identify future expenditures to make sure we get through the whole process of the regular coastal development permit, that'll probably be detailed further. So that's the gist of what we've been doing. We intended to mark these drafts, so they should be considered draft documents at this point. I mean, they get reconciled as you're doing your audit in more detail. So we did our best to straighten out, not having Fund 40 carried forward, and now we have a Fund 39. Kind of reversed the definition. We now have Fund 39 as the operating cost, more or less, and then Fund 40 as the capitalized cost. Again, as Jerry mentioned earlier, the pond closure, the fact that we had the flooding in January of 2017 threw a lot of expenses. They weren't, in our mind, something you would capitalize. These are temporary things like the Baker tanks and the pumps and all the boron testing and everything else that's happening out in the field to get the pond empty is not something you would capitalize. So there's a big hit in the operating costs as a result. So that pretty much summarizes what I have to say. I'd be glad to go into details if you may have detailed questions as well.
I would like to suggest maybe the Finance Committee look at whether the pond closure would be because in order to get through the CDP process on that project, there's certain things that we need to do. I think it might behoove us to have that discussion about setting a policy related to where we account for the funds for those things. Director Pearson?
Finance Committee is going to be busy the next 2 months, so it'd have to be June at the earliest. But correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I'm seeing is that all of the expenses of the SWF, including the loan payments and et cetera, are in 39 year to date.
That's correct.
And going forward, we're going to use 40 for the ongoing maintenance and
Capital cost is for 140.
all right, such as.
The installation, so we're going to need to come up with a system that will enable us to pump brine from the sustainable water facility into some Baker tanks. And then we're going to have to haul that. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, staff, so the installation of those tanks, physical tanks, would probably be a capital cost?
And in addition, you still have consulting costs that are capitalized relating to obtaining the permit for the project.
Okay.
And making sure that, this goes through the whole process, including any appeals on the permit for the rugged coastal development.
Okay,
So you'll see some of those costs that are kind of soft cost. And what Jerry mentioned, I'd consider like hard costs, where you might have to put a pipe over to the tanks and put a couple of tanks to load trucks with and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 40 is going to be for those capital costs going forward, because we still have this set aside of $733,000 from the loan.
Yes.
For mitigation costs.
That's correct.
All right. So then 39 is going to include the loan revenue, right? The
loan, yes.
The revenue that we are collecting.
Correct.
Okay, for loan payments and the loan payments and operational expenses like the testing that we do, et cetera, et cetera. That's all going to be in 39.
That's true.
And only the big capital numbers are going to go into 40.
That's correct.
All right. Now, is that in accordance with the loan document? Because the loan document kind of stipulates that we have to have a separate one for the loan payment.
That's correct. My understanding, yes.
Okay, so it will be in accordance with the loan.
Yes. Not only that, but it's also following generally accepted accounting principles. It's much more clear. So when we get audited on a yearly basis, that's.
I'm with you. Clarity will be there.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Agree that there needs to be, and I've been talking about this, I've mentioned it, so that mitigation money, that set-aside fund, we really need to safeguard that. We need to make sure that we're not spending that on capital things, because we do need to anticipate, that there could be additional litigation, but maybe from a policy perspective, we identify what that mitigation means, that we restrict it to, because once that's gone, where do we go from there? And that's what it's always been a concern of mine. From another policy perspective, as I've indicated, a bunch of times to the board, is we established a rate structure for that sustainable water facility based on the best information we had. And we know now that rate structure is insufficient. So there may be a need to make some slight adjustments upward regarding the cost to run that facility. So those are just some things to think about.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. The costs, that we have already incurred because of the cease and desist on the pond are in 39 now.
That's correct. Yes.
Shouldn't they be in 40? I mean, don't we want to, for future litigation purposes, have a real accounting of all the money that we've spent in mitigation in one fund? Wouldn't that
Well,
make sense?
Let me respond to that question, okay? It all comes back to the nature of operating. Is it day-to-day operating expenses? Then it's 39, okay? If it's part of capital cost, it should be part of 40.
Okay, so-
But as far as, yes, you're correct, Director Pearson. What we also talked about is establishing what's called project cost accounting, okay? Where, for example, if you want to track a particular expenditure such as mitigation, it still shows up as operating costs. But let's say if the board, the public wanted to see a specific cost center just on that particular item, we can also do it that way also. In fact, that's our plan also to establish, we call them project cost centers for those
Yes.
specific projects.
Great. Okay, but I still think that the money that we've already spent on the swale and all of that stuff should be moved into 40, okay? Just so that we have a total accounting so that if we are getting into litigation, we can say, this is the account that we put all of that cost in order to fix that issue that we're litigating. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, let me respond to you. I'm going to respond from an accounting point of view, okay? Technically, the way it works, we have what's called a set, what type of expenses go into capitalization, okay? If it's part of the cost to put that put that plant in order, in working form, yes, that is true, exactly. And it does, and it could involve legal expenses if that's the cost. To make that operational, put it in operational form. And yes, that should be in those costs if it falls under those guidelines.
Yeah, I think we're, Mr. Carmel?
I just wanted to clarify for Director Pearson, which fund our damages are allocated to from my legal perspective is not terribly significant. I know it is from an accounting perspective, but from a legal perspective, it's not.
But from a person understanding who's not an accountant, it also kind of helps to know where stuff is going to be accounted for.
That'll be a different issue, though.
Yeah.
And that's true for me, too. I mean, certainly the clarity that you're going to get from dividing them appropriately. But I just wanted to assure you, if we inappropriately allocate it to Fund 40, that doesn't eliminate our ability to recover it.
Good, thank you.
Are you done?
I have one more question on 39 and 40, and then I have a couple of questions on
Okay.
the overall,
Did you have a response to that one, or okay?
I'll defer.
Just try to keep
I'll
it.
go after
Director Pearson.
Okay, I asked a question on the bond.
The bond?
The bond.
Okay.
And I'm used to performance bonds and stuff
Okay.
from my construction experience, okay? And I just need some clarity as to why we need a performance bond, and it's on the pond?
I can answer that if you'd like, since Rudy wasn't here back at the time that became a requirement.
Let's have district counsel. Go ahead, Mr. Carmel.
No, that was a requirement, Title 22 requirement to have a double liner and then to have that liner bonded so that if there was any leakage from the facility, we would have a source.
And it's $70,000?
It was
a $70,000 bond is what it...
That's the premium annually.
Yeah.
It's an obscene number.
It is obscene.
Yeah, that's one thing we really want to get rid of.
I've done $4 million projects with less bond than that.
It's not cost-centered, so a $13 million project and you've built probably a $100 million project.
Yeah.
It's driven by the vulnerability and the environmental impact that if something was to happen, the mitigation measures associated with cleaning up the groundwater. So you're absolutely right. I mean, I've built projects that, tens of millions and you don't need, you're absolutely right. But it's really associated with the anything if that pond was to fail. So from they put an environmental caveat in there, what they call it, and it could be, that's what really just jacked the price way up.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Just to clarify too, that's right out of Title 27.
All right. Director Farmer?
Thank you. Mr. Hernandez, I just want to ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
On the first page here, 228,
Okay, 328.
under item number 3, the first page, 228, under your finance manager's report.
Okay, yeah. 228?
Uh-huh.
Yes, sir.
It's the first page of your report, if I'm
Correct.
not mistaken. Under number 3, discussion and review of SWF operations. It says here in the middle of that paragraph, staff has concluded that the amount of SWF operating revenues for the current fiscal year are $608,000. To me, revenue means it's generating some kind of income.
Okay,
I hope I'm not misinterpreting that.
you're correct.
So I'd like to know, what does that mean? I mean, like, what revenue is being generated by a plant that isn't operating?
Okay, the way it's currently being reported is under Fund 39, and if you go to page,
I don't want a page.
Okay.
I just want to know,
Okay.
what is the revenue that's being generated by this facility that isn't running?
I think it's more of a Bob. Could you answer that question, Bob? Okay. Okay,
Get out of my area of expertise real quickly here, but it's a base rate that was set up at the time we were dealing with the loan and setting up how to finance this thing. That's my best recollection.
No, it's a very good question. There is a fixed cost associated. If you look at your water bill, every month you're charged, or every 2 months you're charged a fixed cost associated with that facility, whether it's running or not. And that fixed cost is associated with the bond for the loan of the system itself.
So the revenue that's being generated is the money that we're getting from the ratepayers? Is that what we're talking about?
Which is to pay for the loan. That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, so the revenue that's being generated sounds like, oh, this is great, we're getting money, but it's money that we're getting from the ratepayers.
yes, yes.
That's where we get all our money. Correct.
Or taxpayers?
Okay, thank you. And I'd also like to ask about, that's all I wanted to know. And I also wanted to ask this further on in that paragraph. Due to the enormous amount of SWF financial activity, could I get some elaboration on what that means?
Yes, Director Farmer. Activity relating specifically, I guess, to the closure plan, to the cease and desist order. Again, if we do some just quick back of the napkin calculations, the money that I indicated we've spent on the closure plan and the cease and desist order is about $300,000. If you look at the shortfall that we have, this year so far in that system, it's about that much. So there's always a lot of activity on the sustainable water facility. We have everything in the closure plan completely in place right now. All the requirements associated with it. So. But I hope that answers your question. There is a lot of activity, and I know you're chuckling about this, but there's a lot of activity associated with a lot of things going on, a lot of people.
Did you have a further question?
A comment. Actually, I guess it is a question. So, in the past 2 years, the past 2 fiscal years, from the end of June in 2016 to the end of June in 2018, we've gone from 4.8 million in the bank to 2 million. I'm wondering if there is some way, Rudy, and I know this sounds like a humongous task, if you could somehow in the near future explain to us where that $2.8 million went.
If I could, I sent an email to the board. I think I did a pretty good job on telling the story. It was an answer to Director Pearson's. So if you could read that, and I'll resend it to you. If that doesn't answer your question, I think I pretty much knocked it out of the park on where that money had gone from. It's interesting. We started 4.2, but really, if you take a step back behind that was prior to us receiving the 4.2 and the Prop 84 money. We were dangerously low to about $600,000, if you recall, prior to that. So the $4.2 million was an influx in the Prop 84 money. And then I and you may not have got it, I apologize if you didn't, but then I kind of systematically listed some really big ticket items that I thought contributed down to where we are now. But if the board would like a report, I'd be more than happy to work with Rudy, and we can just knock it out of the park and show you where that money started at. You're referencing the 4.2 and where we are now and the expenditures. That wouldn't be difficult at all. But I think just out of total recall, I provided all that information to the board.
Yeah,
Vice President Berenger.
you might check with Tech Integrity, because you mentioned that when I asked on Monday, or it was even before Monday, and you said, read that email, and I have not gotten that email, and there's a couple of emails that you were referring to that I haven't gotten, so. You got it?
I got it.
Okay. Would you do me a favor, President Rice? Would you mind forwarding it to the rest? So now I know why
Yes.
Director Pearson goes, why didn't you answer my email?
Right.
So he asked some very good questions, and Director Farmer asked some very good questions. And one of the questions was, Jerry, are you going to be bringing a report forward as the board directed you regarding the $4.2 million down to the 2.0? This is why you kept saying to me, you never answered Director Pearson's question about the performance bond. I spent about 2 hours answering the email, and I'm glad I did. I went through all my records and everything.
Quite detailed.
And I started telling a story about the 4.2, but it's and where we are now, and I listed all the major expenditures associated with it, and it really. But I'm sorry, Monique, if you could make sure they get that, or you could.
And really, I'm serious. From a technical standpoint, I'd rather print it out. I'll read it. But if we're not getting these emails, I'd like to.
My apologies. My apologies. But I'm hoping the response. I'm hoping the response is adequate. If it's not, we'll go into much more detail. And I answered. It was answering Director Pearson's questions. He had some really good questions.
If I might, unless there's an objection an objection among the board members, perhaps that's something that you could print out and have like essentially as a handout at a public meeting. I mean, if you're confident that the information's correct, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have similar questions that having maybe even have a little chart or something fancy, but it doesn't have to be color.
I'll forward it back onto the board, and since I'm going on vacation, I'll have Monique print out a bunch of copies and put it up the front counter.
Yeah, I think the Finance Committee is going to ask about that on the next meetings. You might bring some copies with you.
And I apologize.
I know you probably have something else, and I have something also. So why don't you go ahead?
Okay, this one more thing, by the way, you don't need, I know the phrase hit it out of the park has been used here, an inside the park home run or even a triple I think would be sufficient and more exciting actually. But, with regard to the amount of money, and President Rice used the phrase, she alluded to the fact that the water facility continues to suck money. That was her words, from district funds. I'm just wondering, and I know this would be a gargantuan or Herculean endeavor on your part, Rudy, but I wonder if there's any chance that you could go back to the spring of 2014 and find out how much money has been spent on this facility. Because
Spring 2014?
Spring of 2014 was when we twisted the emergency water facility permit around and built this facility at a pretty large cost.
Okay.
And,
Be a mischaracterization of what happened.
Well then, all right, well, whatever. So let me just say this. Since, from what I understand, one of the things that people brought up when I was running for this office was the amount of money that has been spent on this facility. And considering that I know one of the things that you talked about was honesty and transparency. I think you're doing a really good job. And by the way, I do want to say you did speak slower, and I think it was much more understandable. And 2 thumbs up, man. I mean, seriously, 2 thumbs up. But I think this would be really important for a real sense of clarity for both sides. The people that are, let's say, in favor of this facility and people that are questioning the need for this facility to really find out how much money has been spent and what will we ultimately gain from it in the long run. So I'm not necessarily requesting that at next month's meeting, But maybe at some point the board could ask for something like that, and you might have some free time, chuckle, to get into that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That would be great if we could make sure we just maybe get that to you after we're finished with the budget, and that's our
Yeah, I
highest
think
priority right
priorities,
now.
yeah.
But absolutely.
I just have a question on page 244. The water department. There's the EWS water base for the residential, commercial. All of that is zeros, but we do collect the base for the EWS base, right? We should have some revenue on those lines, shouldn't we? I'm talking about 4041 and 4044 and 4050. Do you see that where I'm referring to?
Yes, what we can do, Madam President, is next month, when we do the March report, I can write a little section regarding that.
Okay, thank you. I just want to, when I see zeros where it says revenue, I don't.
We don't got to wait till next month. I mean, we should be able to look and find out what the answer is to that, so.
Well, and because this is a public meeting and not everybody who is at this meeting is actually here in the room, because there's lots of people watching either live or they'll watch later, I think it's good for us to put these things, during a meeting so that people get the information, not just the questions, but the answers also. I think it's important. Thank you very much. Director Wharton.
Well, if we're asking Finance Manager Mr. Hernandez to figure the cost of things, can we figure what the cost of water is if we don't have any? I mean, that's what this facility is safeguarding us against. And if we have any questions, we should either take a field trip to East Porterville. Cape Town, South Africa might be a little bit of a stretch for us, but these are two communities that have either faced zero water or are coming up on their day zero quicker than anticipated with Cape Town, South Africa. So I think that, if we can get a cost for what it would cost us, or what the result is if we had no water in the town, what might happen.
Okay.
That maybe it's more of a rhetorical, ideological question, but
I think that's, yeah. All right. I think the last thing is future agenda items.
Are we going to get an audit report next month?
Yes.
And so we're going to have the audit report, we're going to have the rate report, and we're going to do the budget.
Yep.
Whoa.
In one meeting. Don't you think that's a great idea?
And if I could get a consensus.
We're spending, or Alex Handler is going to be, it's not going to take very much board action. It's going to be an introduction.
Right.
And usually he does that in about 30 minutes or 45 minutes, so that shouldn't be.
So we can give him further direction to refine what he's put together. I also heard a request for policy ad hoc committee to review. So if we could please have on the agenda, would it be helpful, Ms. Madrid, if we actually put these future agenda items in the form of motions, or can we do this informally?
Yeah, if we can do it informally, let's define that a little bit more. On the agenda would be the establishment of an ad hoc committee for policy, and perhaps even, I would like, as part of a report, whether we have one, even if it's really old, what we're presently using for policy and what we need to move, just a little bit of an outline so people knew what their objective was if they were to set up that thing. But for that reason, you understand what I'm, in other words, is there a policy manual?
The policies of the board. And is there a policy manual for the district? Why
don't we use, may I suggest something? Director Pearson has certain ones that he learned about at the conference. Yes. Why don't we focus on those? And
I can send you a list of the ones that they recommended that we had.
Well, I think this is for the discussion once we have it on the agenda. Right. And I know it delays things a little bit, but I think it's important that we have a discussion once it's agendized, and we can then go over those lists. So the board should be prepared to have that discussion
at
the next meeting. Is that okay?
Yep.
Director Wharton?
to remind Director Pearson about the plot for sustainable water-conserving plant landscaping. I think if we could agendize that down the road somehow, maybe even look at a plot of land that CCSD owns, maybe the pocket park, since it's not in use for anything currently. That might be a nice spot for that, nice central location just down the street from the historical. We can get some of the Forest Committee or the Land Watch or Green Space or whoever to put on these maybe different plots, maybe not just one single plot with everything, but you could.
So maybe an idea that about having that discussion about having a program like that.
You might want
It
to.
might be that we'd have to wait for the budgeting process to get something like that going. Right. I don't want it, can we put it on the, at least on the list so that we've got, so we don't lose track of it? Because I think you're right. I think you're right. So, Mr. Carmel?
Even if we kick something just to these, even if we kick something to these committees that Director Farmer is on, the Land Watch or Fiscal Union Ranch or something that is environmentally sensitive to the area, that they could maybe put on a workshop on the property.
That's an idea.
Mr. Carmel?
Just so we can conform to the language on the agenda, and for
Yes.
clarity's sake, we really should be doing these by motion, adding future
Okay.
agenda items.
So-
Just so there's no confusion. That's actually how we have it worded, too.
Okay, so I would move that we add the following items to the agenda, future agenda items. The audit, the budget, the rates presentation, the policy ad hoc committee,
I'll second that.
and the, as an amend, can I, since you
Amend, sure.
seconded, I just want to amend that to have a future, so we don't lose track of the gardening and water-wise landscape program.
I'll accept that amendment.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Did you get can you please read that back to me, please? I'll say please 4 more times.
The motion was made to add the following items to the future agenda: audit, budget, rates presentation, policy for an ad hoc committee, and Berenger seconded that, and then you added the June agenda, development of, I'm not quite sure what it is we're doing, water-wise presentations at the Pocket Park?
Programs for water-wise landscaping.
I like it.
It doesn't need to be June. I'm not a farmer, so I don't know when the good time to be planting stuff anyway.
Let's not forget about it. That's
Yeah, that one's a, as time allows, that last one.
As time allows. I like it. I'll accept that. To be determined.
All right. So we have the motion. Is it clear, Monique, now? Did you?
Yeah, so it's programs for water-wise gardening for a future agenda.
Yes.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
It's something I already, is that okay?
Sure.
It's something I already brought up, but how about a standing committee for water resourcefulness and potential grant funding?
As a future agenda?
And I realize that's something in some degree that Dean is already doing for us, but I think, having people right here in the community being involved with something like that, and like I said, I brought it up before, the more proactive and future-looking we can be, I think the better off this community would be.
I think that as a future agenda item.
If you would be agreeable to future agenda item, so that not like in the next 2 months, but yeah.
We got a lot of
Cool.
And Madam President, may I
Would
just?
that be acceptable?
That's acceptable, yeah.
I just want to intervene. The board adopted goals, and maybe at some point you can bring those back and focus on your goals. But I know your guys' heart's in the right place, but we can't have standing committees and and looking for grants, which I
But
think
we
is a
need to
priority.
have the discussion.
Yeah,
To have the
yeah.
discussion, we need to have agendized. And in order for you to be able to make that argument, whether
Absolutely.
we should or not, that
just-
would be done at that time. I understand where you're coming from, and that's the discussion that we'll have once it's on the agenda.
And I
Okay.
appreciate that. Thank you, Board, because what happens is I leave here and my staff
I-
huddles me in the hallway.
I
and-
gotcha. That's
and
why
goes,
we have the discussion
We don't have any
now.
more
Yeah.
bandwidth, Jerry, so thank you, Board.
So we added on there with the agreement of the second.
We should not forget the
When time
potential,
allows.
the potential
Right,
of
a potential of an additional standing committee
additional standing committee, period.
to cover grants and
Water resourcefulness.
water
Water
efficiency.
Water
Yeah,
resourcefulness.
resourcefulness. Yes, thank you.
Call the roll.
I would like to have the roll call, please.
Okay. President Rice,
Aye.
Vice President Berger,
Aye. I almost did.
Director Pearson,
Aye.
Director Wharton,
Aye.
Director Farmer.
Aye, aye, aye.
Thank you very much. I think we can call this meeting done. We are adjourned.